I want you to know how I appreciated that you was able to do that with me, especially with your own equipment when I didn't have to bring all my microphones, laptops and everything. It's like 70% of weight gone, and that's amazing for me. It's easier to travel.
I have, it's all here, so it just made sense just to say, hey, I'm throwing my mics up. Plus you get to hear these delicious Sennheiser MKH50s.
Like I said, they look like crap. Sounds amazing.
They're not the best looking design mics, but you'll be hard pressed to find a better sounding mic.
I probably will not, especially you saw mine.
You are currently sat within what I call the bubble. Have we started, or are we?
Don't worry, we go.
Okay, you're currently sat in what I call the bubble, which ironically I've. The gags, as we call them, these things, it looks like a bubble. But if you picture this round circle at the end, like being about this big, like, and then going out to about here, that's kind of the sweet spot of the proximity of the mics. So when I have my boom ops doing their thing, like if the mic's too far away, it sounds very distant and not super beautiful. It sounds like the room, but then they kind of come down 2 inches and they get the person within the bubble of that proximity, and you almost hear them go, and then suddenly their voice goes from being like not next to the mic or not within the proximity to just being delicious, absolutely delicious.
So a little bit like I would sound better than normal.
Kind of, yeah. Like you were saying about your voice earlier, and if you sound bad on this mic, brother, then we got to send you in for recalibration.
We have a really big problem. That's the issue.
Yeah, I have to get a whole new mic, which is going to cost me thousands of pounds just to re-record this podcast.
Yeah, it's what I can say is a high quality podcast, so it have to be like that.
Well, that's how we roll with random clamps I found in my grips.
How has happened you are in this industry, to be honest, because if you see what is behind you, it's more than hobby.
Well, I mean, that's a small question with a incredibly long answer.
We have a time.
Okay. When I was at school, so if you do a little wibbly wobbly like visual effect, and we'll do some Wayne's World stuff, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, none whatsoever. And it was the whole thing of like, shall I become a bricklayer? That kind of thing.
That's good choice, to be honest. They do it a lot of money now.
Yeah, this is true, actually. They probably work more regularly and to a certain degree earn more. I don't know. I mean, I get paid very well for what I do, so I don't really have too much complaints with the possibility of what my career offers. But anyway, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And then I heard Firestarter by The Prodigy. At the time, I didn't like music at all. Didn't actually understand it. It was like a weird thing. I'd watch people listen to music, and it used to confuse me as to how this sound that they were listening to would just transfix people. And I was almost jealous and envious because it would bring them so much joy and they'd have so much focus for it. But I just didn't get it. I was just like, it's not a hot dog. It's not a movie,
To be honest, music hypnotizes people.
Exactly. And I just didn't get it. It was like staring at a blank piece of wallpaper with nothing on it. And then everyone else being ridiculously entertained. And you're just being like, this is just a blank piece of wallpaper. What does it do? There's nothing here. But then when I heard that song, that's when it kind of clicked. I was like, oh, damn. Like, is this what music is meant to do to you? Like, is this, all my synapses were firing, and it's obviously an incredible track. And I still profess that Firestarter by the Prodigy is one of the most original and like genuine sounding number one singles that's ever been. Like even now, 20, 30 years later, it's like you'll be hard pushed to find a song that's that unique sounding with the breaks, the vocal on it by Keith, the sound that's really visceral, but there isn't really specifically a melody that's hummable, but it's just that it's so in your face and it's so memorable. And the video as well, they tried to get it banned, but there's no violence in it, there's no nudity. It's just a guy with a haircut.
Amazing haircut.
Yeah. That was another thing, is that twist on that 70s punk that no one had been doing much with, but it was just that evolution and that inspiration from that it just catapulted it. It was so unique, so genuine, so real. And then from there, I was just like, okay, now I get what music is. But I guess the way I've always approached things, it's not like I'll go and appreciate them. I actually want to know how they're made and how they come together. So my friends at the time were all into DJing. So I immediately was like, okay, I'll be a DJ. I'll DJ with them, and everyone was comparing mixtapes and doing mixes and scratches and stuff. So I started doing that, but I was more interested in. So the mixer I got was this shabby old thing, but it had like a 6-second sampler on it with a big button, and you smack it, and you can record a couple of seconds, then speed it up and slow it down, and there was a little delay effect on it. And I spent all my time just playing with that. I did learn how to mix, but it's not that hard. People who bang on about it, come on guys, like beat matching 2 records really isn't that difficult once you figure it out, and once you've got the rhythm for it. But the actual being more creative with it was more interesting to me. And I was constantly telling my friends at the school at the time, like, we need to start thinking differently, because they were all trying to do the same thing everyone else was doing, which was the basics, and they all got really good at it very quickly. Credit to them. But they were walking the exact same footsteps as everyone else.
A simple way to do it, something which one is already done by someone else.
Yeah. But they weren't really. They were trying to be the people that they were interested in, but they weren't thinking like 10 years ahead or 5 years ahead. They were just emulating and copying. And for me, it was like, if you really want to stand out, do the thing that no one else is, because that's what real evolutions and step forwards, that's that's required. Like the original hip hop, that was taking records and mixing the same record together, but not actually blending them, but cutting between the same section of music repetitively to create just that static beat. And then of course, because it's just like a 2 or a 4 bar section, you don't have the rest of the music kicking in, which means a rhyme artist then has space.
That's called sampling, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's where it came from.
Many lawsuits are at the moment because of that.
Yeah. And so I was trying to get my friends to do different stuff, like mix backwards, having record decks speed up into the tempo matching and stuff, and they weren't listening to me. And then I very quickly realized that DJing was not a passion for me, and it wasn't something I wanted to do. And then from there it was like, okay, well, I still like this. So the next progression was obviously I want to make music, and that's kind of where all this stuff came in. I then went to college, and I asked my audio teacher at the time, like, how do I make music? And
what kind of college it was?
Oh, it was just a basic media communications class, because I didn't know what I was going to do with myself after school. So I jumped on that, and that had like a taste on everything. So you could do a little bit of film studies. A little bit of film.
The best water ever. This magic cup.
It's chilled and filtered. West London's finest.
Works.
Yeah. Only with a hint of pollution, just for the taste. Just for the taste. They did some film and other bits, but they also had like an audio editing section. So I remember asking the teacher like, how do you make music? And first thing he said was, oh, no, you don't want to do that. It's too complex. I was like, that's why I'm here, man. I want to know how you produce it. How do you do that? So he said, okay, well, I use an Atari, but don't use an Atari because that's too complex. So I went straight out and bought an Atari. And this is like 1998, I think. And then I had this Atari, and I was like, why do you use an Atari? Like a couple months later, so MIDI. I was like, oh, okay, so there's those things on the side. Bought some MIDI cables, put a Casio keyboard on it because I had MIDI connections on it. That's all I knew. And then spent months just trying to get like an input into the Atari. And when I say input, I just mean the MIDI data. It was hieroglyphics to me. There wasn't any manuals or anything. I had like a hokey copy of Cubase, like everyone did back then, on a disc. And so like 3-4 months of that just to get MIDI in, and then once that happened, I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. It's the actual data notation of music itself. And then a couple of months later, I figured out how to get MIDI out. And at that point, you've got an actual kind of...
Sorry, there was nobody else who did it. You can just learn on someone. So you have to discover everything on your own.
My teacher should have taught me, but he did not.
He didn't know.
He was pretty grumpy and didn't like me very much because I asked a lot of questions. And
How you dare ask questions in school?
yeah, it was a bit. Even now, my friends are like who I went to college with. They were still baffled by it. But yeah, he basically just gave me the word like Atari, MIDI, and that was it. And then I had to go and figure out the rest. And then from there, it was just saving up every penny I had. Bought like an old sampler, a phrase sampler, which was awful, but it was enough to, manipulate and play around with some stuff. When I say manipulate, I mean like change the pitching and tune stuff. Getting into real proper synthesis until later. But that was the building blocks of working out just audio itself, really. I learned some basic elements with those guys, or that teacher, and then from there, I then went off to Reading College and did a HND and an advanced version of that as well. That was probably where I actually got real teaching, because those guys were focused on actually teaching you how to produce music and produce sound. And the teachers I had, shout out to those guys, because I had some really, really cool ones. Nick and Rich, some guys I'm still in contact with, actually.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, they're a really inspirational, man. And I went from like having an audio teacher at the college in Bracknell to
Who didn't teach audio?
who would shout at me and almost threaten me at times, to this other place where I was almost conditioned not to ask questions. But then when I got there, I was so excited, I started asking loads of questions. But they weren't shutting me down. They had a thing where at the beginning of the lesson they would be like, right, Simon, don't put your hand up. We will answer all your questions at the end. And then I would have like 10 questions. I would go into crazy detail on with them, but they'd always give me the time and really encourage that. And I was quite thankful for that of them. And it was like through that period, just soaking up all the knowledge and then using my student loan to like buy better synthesizers and get my first like audio computer. So moving just from MIDI on an Atari, which was archaic, and then into actually doing some proper sound editing and getting down that channel and starting to really understand the basics of that. And obviously a lot of details at the music tech course, which was right up my street. I love that kind of stuff. And then countless issues of Sound on Sound, the magazine. I had like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of them. So it was a stack that was like 7 meters high. And every month I'd get that magazine and read it cover to cover. And at the beginning it was like, again, like reading hieroglyphics, because they've got all these words like polyphony and multitimbrality, and you've never been exposed to any of that. You're like, what the hell does this mean? LFOs, oscillators, filters, saturation. Oh, okay, that sounds like butter.
To be honest, the one word I only understand is saturation here. So
Exactly. But then I just kept reading and reading and reading and reading and reading, and just eventually just took it on board and worked out what those things were. And then slowly but surely built up a collection of synthesizers and a computer, as I said. And then that's kind of what led me. I came out of college from that, and I should have probably been looking for a job in a studio. But the period in which I went through that education was the early 2000s, which was when MP3s happened. A lot of the studio business moved to home studios, which I was kind of doing myself anyway. And of course, lots of studios shut down. There was like one studio a week shutting down or whatever it was. It was ridiculous. So there wasn't any work for me. So that was, I went into the world with no opportunities, but fully trained for those opportunities. It no longer
which one don't exist?
Yeah, it was very ironic. So I spent a number of years just doing jobs I absolutely hated, being very angry about it. Typically like working in a bar or a bowling alley or something and having someone, I mean, I imagine they're talented or smart in their own right, but they usually had little big man syndrome in that their head, like they were an assistant manager, yet they considered themselves to be a drill sergeant.
That's funny with people, because on my side I met a few people like that. You give them a little bit power and they think that they are someone.
Yeah.
Guys, we just work together. That's it.
They don't realize the difference between like a didctator and a leader.
Oh, it's huge.
And for them it's just yelling at you and trying to. They didn't really understand the concept of motivating. And for me, like cleaning shoes or pulling pints for the locals, which I never really got along with anyway. I shouldn't have had those jobs. I was so bad at them. I was capable, but I just I absolutely hated them. They were terrible. Getting talked down to or yelled at for not cleaning some shoes in a bowling alley or something. It was just annoying and really angry, and had a lot of angst in me. And then eventually I got fired / left.
More fired or more left?
That's the thing. It was a very, very, it was an agreement that I should no longer go.
Okay.
And that they would no longer pay me, and I would accept that. And they had like a file on the.
People are strange.
Yeah, they can be a bit odd, especially in that kind of place and that kind of mindset, which is where I came from and where I left. And it was at that point I remember bumping into a friend of mine, Pika Chica, I used to call her.
That's nice.
And it was the day that they got rid of me, and I was just walking around town after leaving that meeting and trying to work out if I felt sad or happy or just being a bit ambivalent about it all. And I bumped into her, and so I've just been kind of fired / asked to leave. And she was ecstatic, and I was like, but I have no job now. I'm jobless again. She was like, no, you don't understand. This is the best thing that ever happens, that will ever happen, because you were wasted in that place. You were just kind of clocking in and not really doing anything with yourself. And it was that kind of little conversation that triggered a deeper thought about it. And I look at that moment very positively now, and it was very, very cool. And just to bump into that right person at the right time as well, that kind of shifts the way you're viewing.
Direct you the right
way.
Yeah,
they nudge you in the right way, and they saw a bigger picture of stuff that when you're focused on something, you tend not to.
I know the problem.
Have everything else in view.
So focus on this small little movement there that you don't see whole picture.
So that kind of helped me readjust, and it was from there that I remember thinking I need a career, not a job. I need something to actually focus myself on. And I'd spent some time doing some live music and trying to do my own music stuff, and that wasn't catching fire. And I've never really stopped to a certain degree, but I used to play live, but I stopped doing that about a decade ago. But it was at that point I kind of sat down and I was like, right, this is just a problem to solve. How do I figure out a career for myself? Like, how do you...
Something happens.
Come closer to your mic.
I'm coming to my mic.
There you go.
Here I am.
That's it.
Hello, Mike.
Oh, he's back.
I'm back.
You're saying you've got a terrible voice. You've got a beautiful voice, brother. It's smooth on this mic.
Yeah, that's Mike fault.
Give me some Konrad trailer.
No,
In a world of bananas and cakes.
In a world when directors don't have a job.
You mean every day?
Basically, yes. Okay, man. Where have you been?
So I believe, ironically, we were talking about me not having a job.
Yeah, that's exactly where I am now. Come on.
So I had that moment, and then I decided I need to not think about having a job, but instead think about having a career. So I looked at it as a problem solution.
This goes, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's.
Yeah, that was. Keep going.
Let's have a. Yeah. Square.
Nice.
Tiny square. It's going down.
Not that I want to be on picture all the time.
All right, little moment for editing. And we're back. I approached it like a problem solution kind of thing. So I wrote down. I started off by writing down all my interests, and when I say interests, I don't just mean like I like to record. Like I went down into the minute detail of everything I like. You know, synthesis. I like to do this. I like to do that. Some basics for editing or this and so on and so forth. And then I wrote down a list of my attributes. So what I'm good at, the things I have training in, and my personality attributes as well, like good under pressure, good with limited resources. So if you say we need this and this, but we've only got this, then I'm good at kind of problem solving that and figuring out how to create a product with little input to it, if you will. And then once I had that kind of grid of things, I then just started trying to find jobs or research things that would use those various different attributes and skill sets. And one of the things that came up quite a lot with the referencing was sound for film. And in my mind at the time as well, I was like, you never hear of anyone wanting to do sound for film. Either it's an absolutely terrible job, or it's just everyone is so obsessed with being a cameraman or a director.
Thank you.
That that's usually the thing, DOP or director. That no one actually thinks about, how do you actually record voices on set? So then that sparked my interest. I was like, okay, that sounds actually pretty. That could be something that I can do. Because I know how to record, I know the basics of a gain structure from my training and from my education, and I'm pretty good in difficult situations. So from there, I just started trying to figure out how to do it. And at the time, my friend circle, they were all kind of moving into film and TV anyway. So we had a friend of ours who was an editor, and he was going down that road. One of my other friends wanted to be a director. One of my other friends wanted to be a script writer. We had a couple of friends who wanted to be performers. And then between us all, like we had some girlfriends or some boyfriends who wanted to do other little bits of jobs like location scouting or...
Basically, you had a crew.
Yeah. It was one of those serendipitous situations where we had enough people that wanted to do different things, so we weren't colliding against each other. It was very cohesive, and we fit together basically. And me being boisterous at the time, a couple of my friends wanted to write a comedy series and then get it commissioned, and they had a really good go at it as well. They did like a little pilot in one of my friends' master's class for television, and the pilot was pretty good. And so they tried to get it out there, but at the same time, I wanted to do some stuff. So I started yelling at them, it's all well and good to try and get this sold and picked up, but unless you're knocking on doors every single day, which they weren't, that's a lot of wasted time. So I kind of told them all the exact same thing I just said, that we have someone in every department who wants to do stuff. We're not having to go out and find other people because we're all here and we all want to do this. So why don't we just start making stuff ourselves? And then they've got two lines of progression going on. And then if the situation happened where a company did take notice, we'd already have a web series online where it shows that us as a team can actually make something, and there's the product there, and it can work. There's a little trashy program called Hand Island. So if you're ever bored and you want to see a 3-foot fluffy toy tiger do terrible things with its genitals.
That sounds very promising.
Everyone had a fun time doing that episode.
Okay. I imagine what he was talking about that during the shooting.
Yeah, go and check it out if that's piqued your interest.
Yeah.
Look it up, because it's a bit of a wacky. It's obviously done by some students, but at the same time, there is a coherent thread there. But yeah, it's a very weird little program. Like 3 parts Mighty Boosh, 3 parts Spaced, and then another 4 parts from God knows where else. There was lots of like film and television references in it, so it was a lot of fun to make. Very stressful, doing my first shooting experience on a beach in the rain, where my friend who was producing turned up with tomato sauce sandwiches, and that was our crafty for the entire shoot.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I still yell at him for that.
I learned that there was this pizza.
Pizza, oh man! Whenever I do shoots now and they say, "Oh, pizza," the rest of the crew are like, "Oh my god!" But for me, I still remember that first experience of tomato sauce sandwiches and not eating for 3 days. So the pizza just seems like gourmet meal to me now.
To be honest, on my first set, when I was doing my first short, which one we never finished, by the way, I learned how important for everyone is food.
Oh yeah.
And after first day of cheap pizza, the cheapest of the cheapest, margarita kind of thing, I convinced my mom to cook something for our whole crew. So she did a huge portion of a couple of dishes, which one my dad bring on in car to the set. you don't imagine how people was happy.
Oh man, it makes the world of difference. If you're shooting long hours, you need to make sure you've got decent food. If you're not shooting long hours, you can get away with a shit meal because people are going to go home in a decent time. But if you are shooting long hours and you've got shit food, you're not very good at filmmaking. I shout this out to the producers out there who might be watching this.
Food is important.
Yeah, feed your troops.
Food
man.
and sleep.
I've done way too many bad things, bad films and productions with just food was just awful and sleep non-existent. The first like 6-7 years of my career was just no sleep basically. So when you do get a chance to sleep, I take that opportunity.
I learned very fast how sleep is important. During the shooting fighter, what I noticed is because it was my first big set, which one I was in charge of, and whenever it was a dinner break, 1 hour, everyone eat amazingly fast. Like they was speeded, and straight away go sleep for 45 minutes. For first 3 days, I didn't know why they do it that. After that, I just joined them.
You see, you were directing on that one, weren't you?
Yeah.
So directors don't eat food and they don't have sleep. All they do is just, they want shots.
I know.
You feast on shots. And while the rest of the crew are dying and falling over, you guys like switch into this new like mechanism of nourishment of, I need another shot to stay alive. And it's a really strange thing seeing people to go through that.
It was a huge curve of learning for me. Go from the shorts and stuff like that to the professional set, which one I'm in charge of. And all of the guys there had for 30 movies, as a crew. DP was internationally recognized. And every minute on the set cost, fortune.
Yeah.
And I had to learn how to do a movie on it.
Yeah. But you see, directing's a weird one because I've got this kind of well-established theory that I don't mean this in a bad way, but quite often the director is the least experienced person on set.
On the first one, I was the less experienced on the set.
And I don't mean that like to point it out. It's just most other departments, there is, even now when there's not much available for new people, there are still channels to go through and build up your career. Whereas a lot of times a director will go from like a small position or not having much experience on set at all to then just being the director via the course of being a writer and then having a project brought up and having the right producers behind you to get you into that situation. So then they're thrust into this position where suddenly I've noticed you said a few times that you were in charge of, which I think is actually the terminology slightly wrong there in that because the director isn't really in charge.
No.
Usually that's the AD and the producers,
yes.
And the directors they kind of babysit the creativity of it. They make sure that everything is just the focus is in the right place.
And you're right of that, but and there is always a small but. When something goes wrong, that's when director have to start to take over a few things, and especially when the producers are out of the set and DP is very, very experienced and treats you a little bit like the kid who just come to play with the toys, then you have to show you have balls.
Yeah, it is important to stand your ground, but then in those situations I think it kind of shows the people you have around you as well. So for me, I spent a number of years boom operating, but now I've like the last 5 years been focused mainly on only recording and being a production mixer, which is a HOD within that environment. And the way I look at it is always to arm the director, because the director's the one that's there before pre-production, and they're the ones there at the opening of the film. So they're babysitting it all the way through. The only other person who probably spends any more time than them, or the same amount of time, is the producer. But the thing is, the producer isn't there on set every day. The director's
always there.
Is pretty much in some kind of seat throughout the entirety of the life of the gestation of that product. So for me, when I'm there, I don't. Like, I'm an expert at what I do, and a lot of times the director will tell me, "Don't worry about that. I know a person who can solve that." I usually have to have a difficult conversation with them and explain to them, you think you know someone that can fix that, but the thing is you don't know it can be fixed. Whereas I know it can't be fixed, because if you get that person on the phone who you think can fix it, and I have a conversation with them, we will both tell you that you're wrong. You're just assuming it because that assumption helps you get through this moment quicker than actually dealing with the reality of the problem. But that's kind of there's a negative implication of that example. But my point to that is I'm there to arm the director as much as possible. I'm not there to tell them what to do. I'm there to give them options. Yeah. And that's something I'm very, very proud of. And I take a lot of joy in, because I always go to them like, what do you want here? What do you want here? We've got a problem here, but these are the solutions I've got for you. And I try to build the habit of calling my department solutions department. So we come up with ideas before the problems even emerge. We have plans and strategies for every situation. So when it does happen, we're ready to just shift gears and figure it out on the spot, and make sure that they can get that shot or that performance. So when they get through it and they ask, are we okay? I say, yep, don't worry. We've configured things so you've got this option and you can make it work with this.
One of the first things I learned is fixing post doesn't exist on set.
Yeah, that's not a thing.
That's not the thing.
If you're choosing that, you're not choosing filmmaking. Yes. You're choosing editing, which means you shouldn't be filmmaking. You should be editing.
It just doesn't exist, and it costs a lot of money.
It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. But I mean, I presented. There was a slight negative tone in what I just said, but on the whole, I've actually been quite blessed in that, like 95% of the people I work with, like they understand the true meaning of the word collaboration. And I'm not talking about the bad version of collaboration where they don't pay you. That's just a word, it's a collaboration, therefore I don't have to give you any money. It isn't a secret bonanza, like coupon day word. Like the real version of it is you confer and communicate with each other, and you create the solutions to things. You create the end product together. So my expertise is then used and relied on, which is what I was going to get to the point with you and the situation you're in, where you hadn't had the opportunity to have that much experience directing, but then you were directing a real thing with real skill sets, a real production, real investment in it. In those situations, what you should be able to do is rely on your HODs, because a director shouldn't have to do everything, and they shouldn't have to micromanage. Like they should have big picture questions.
Definitely, and that's after it took me a few days to switch from doing shorts to do it movie. In shorts, director is doing not only directing, is managing everything, do it all the micro decisions and because most of the people on the shorts, they are just for fun.
Yeah.
The shorts is not making movies. Whoever say that, oh, I did shorts, I'm a filmmaker. No, you're not yet. You're just preparing to be filmmaker.
Well, yes, that is. I kind of agree with you. I certainly agree with the point you're making. I do think there are people who go through that short process, even though that.
No, it's a very needed process. It's part of the way.
I was actually going to say positively to the people who go through that, and actually say I very much attribute the term filmmaker to them, because that if anything, it's a harder situation because you have less resources, less skill sets, less focus. Like you're having to keep everyone on point, and manage them to the end goal. Really project manage them. That's
project management. Yeah. That's what it is.
But they are a real filmmaker because they're really making something and they're putting it together. Whether it's commercial or high level production or just with like 10 quid and favors, you're still an actual filmmaker.
To be honest, when I was doing shorts, most of my shorts, the biggest value in financial value of them, it was food. Everyone brings something. Everyone bring cameras, microphones. Everyone had something.
Hey.
And I had to invest in food to make them happy.
Keep them fed. Keep them energized, and give them something to sleep off for 45 minutes after their 50 minutes of scoffing. Yeah. I've done that myself, man, many times.
I know.
Especially boom operating when you're doing 4 or 5 hours of commuting every day, 12 hours on set, and you're holding a stick above your head for like 10 hours of those.
These guys have very strong hands.
Yeah, well, it's not really hands. It's more shoulders, posture, breathing. That's an important one. Like a lot of guys they take breathing for granted. But when you're in that situation where you get to that 6th, 7th, 8th minute and your arms are just, they're really starting to burn, you then have to really focus on the technique of I wouldn't say locking your body, but having it static without too much tension. And you get it a lot in jiu-jitsu where you're in a position that you're engaged in, but you're not fully blowing
You
on.
cannot be.
No. So you're kind of leveling in at that 65, 70% kind of area where you're ticking over, but you're not blasting. And then trying to get through a take with that. The only thing you can really do is focus on your breathing and try and make sure that I used to visualize pushing the blood around my body with freshly oxygenized blood cells, so that my muscles could then replace and regenerate while I was in that situation when I'm using them, getting into those long takes, especially when you've done like 20, 30-minute takes and everyone's just ad-libbing their butt off and you don't know who's going to talk or when they're going to talk, or and
You have to be in focus.
You've got to be a mind reader, man.
To be honest, when the director prepared the scene and present scene, at least that's how I did. I prepared the scenes with the actors and with minimum people on set. Everyone, please leave and let us do it.
Which is what's commonly known as blocking.
Yep.
So you build the scene.
Then I invite DP and the person in charge of sound and present them the scene. Then I speak with DP about what I want from him and what his ideas about that. But I noticed that not often I did spoke to the sound person, and which was big mistake. But I'm still happy that I invite him to that, because I hear from my friend now that often they don't even invite the sound engineer to the scene.
Yeah, it's dumb. There's been a few situations where I've had to not force that, because it's not my place to force that, but to strongly recommend that. And for instance, you said you kick everyone out and only have the actors and director. I'm an advocate for when that begins. I always say, why don't you just let the DP and the boom op sit in the back of the room? Because the longer and the more opportunities they get to see it, the better. And of course, in that situation, they're not interfering; they're just observing. So in that situation, I think is actually appropriate, and it's not invasive for the actors because it's just 2 extra eyes. But they're not assessing what's going on, because that's the moment when the director really works with the actors to actually build what's going on, and they can get into some of the minutiae of the performance and the trigger points of where the performance goes and why and how and stuff. But as a boom op, when I was doing that, the earlier I could get in and see it, not as a finished product, but see it come together as those micro adjustments are made and the scene, the blocking becomes tighter and tighter. That is just like anything. When you've got repetitions on something, you get better at it. So instead of just seeing a rehearsal once and then being expected to know all the lines, all the blocking, know where everyone is, I've seen it come together, and I'm making mental notes. Okay, mic here, we're going to put that there. This is where a scuffle happens, so the radio mics are off, which means we need to make sure there's a boom at this point. So we've got that covered. So all those little mental points you make. As a boom op, I used to do that. Now as a HOD, I don't. I send my boom op or my first assistant in, and then they report back, and they're like, "Right, cool, we've got this going on. I reckon we should have a plant here, and this here, and this here." And then at that point, I usually get a chance to see a rehearsal as well, or a final rehearsal, before all the lighting and other stuff comes in. And then I can be like, okay, well, that's actually, I don't like that idea, but what about if we adjust that like this and change that for this, or just a final kind of conference with the first. But on the whole, they're the ones who will then they kind of make the plan, and then as a production mixer, I'll sign it off and like, yeah, fantastic. But then also for me, it gives me then a chance to actually lay it out technically. So while they're actually in the field, getting the mics put in place and make sure the radio mics are set up on the actors, I can make sure the desk and all the inputs are properly labeled and calibrated, and I know which mics are where. So then when they're in a certain situation, say the radio mics and the boom are off, but there's a plant for something, I can bring that specific plant in for one line at the end of the room or something, which means we can hopefully bring it together almost like a theatre play. And then the director sits with his cans on, watches it, and gets to see the entire scene listened to their ears, which is great. And then they've got an idea of how it actually works.
So what was the biggest challenge in any movie you've been?
Oh, that's a I've done a lot of weird, crazy challenges.
Come on, we're open for it.
I would say there's probably two that spring to mind. In 2017, that was it was one of the last times I boom operated. And boom operators are generally termed as the first assistant sound, and then we actually had a second assistant sound. The ever great Taz Fairbanks, who's currently off working with Simon Hayes. In fact, she's there now. She's their new number 2 on that second AS for that team, which I'm incredibly proud of her for. So shout out to Taz. And I was firsting for a gentleman by the name of Mark Andrews, a good friend of mine, fantastic mixer, an absolute. Because we do the same job now, we rarely get a chance to work with each other, which is a shame because he's such a good friend. And the jobs I did with him, like, we did some awful jobs, but we always had a good time together because we knew how to balance each other out. And like, he would use my energy as a catalyst for things, but then he was very calm, very mature approach to things. I am as well, but that would be his counterpoint to me, and we trusted each other emphatically as well. So if I said I'm going to go do this, it wasn't really a conversation. It wasn't me dictating to him either. It was him knowing that is going to be the best way because we think very, very similarly. So that was my last boom operating gig. The reason why it's challenging was because we kind of called it the Game of Thrones documentary because it was a Game of Thrones comedy rip-off, like Hot Shots to Top Gun.
Yeah.
It was done in that kind of style, and the script,
good 80s.
Yeah. The script actually was one of those few times when I read it and I was like, this is actually quite funny. Like, I would take 10 or 15 minutes in the morning and just go off and read it and prep for the day. I'd be chuckling away reading the script, and this is actually pretty good, man. If they shoot this script, we've got a movie. Yeah, this is the jokes are hitting, they're landing. Like, it's American comedy, so there's always a ceiling as to how good it can be. But for American comedies, it was great, man. Shout out to the writer as well. He was really cool. So the script was great, but then due to the way the film was set up, there was a lot of like really weird behind the scenes shenanigans and dodginess that was going on. For instance, the man who was meant to direct it wasn't able to because they needed to do some kind of weird tax credit by using a British director. So then the actual director was brought in as an AD, and he knew what needed to happen, so he was trying to steer the ship. And the director they found was, he wasn't a director. He was a fight choreographer that had done a few things in his spare time, and yeah, he had no clue what he was doing. I call him a plank of wood because that was pretty much the presence he had in the room. You ask him a question and then cut to a plank of wood. You cut back to the person who answers the question. Okay, that's a great idea. Yeah, had nothing to offer anyone. It was awful. The point, I mean, I'm meandering on quite a lot here, is they just let the actors do whatever the hell they wanted to do. And after about 2 or 3 days, it went from 1 camera shoot to a 2 camera shoot, which is infinitely more complicated. So you then go from having a script and knowing who's going to do what, when and where to just free for all.
For hope.
Yeah. And I'm having to try and dart and dodge 2 cameras, which are just going wherever the hell they'll start wide, going to a close up and then come back to a wide, bearing in mind they were doing that with fixed lenses. So just running into a scene with the camera and coming back out again. And it was absolutely chaos. So trying to manage that and stay out of shot and then just keep everyone on mic when they were just going ballistic and not knowing what was going on from 1 minute to the next. That was a challenge. That was very, very difficult. And probably the other one was a film I did last year, which was no, actually it was probably the one I did the year before that. I was working with some nice people, but their budget and their plan for that budget didn't match up. It was too ambitious. So for us to make the day, you obviously know that term, we would basically have to shoot about 130% of what was actually possible.
Oh my!
Which means you're not finishing a scene, prepping and going to the next scene. You're finishing a scene, and then someone is shouting at you, "Why aren't you shooting the next scene now, instantly? Why isn't there a red light on? The actors aren't even prepped. The costumes aren't even changed. The cameras aren't even in the next room yet. Yep, you're already behind immediately because that's
Who made the plan? The day plans for that?
well, that always falls to the producer, the director, and the
Yeah,
AD.
yeah.
Mostly the AD builds the plan, and then the
but
director confirms.
the question is, if you do it unrealistic plan, you cannot expect to finish movie.
Well, it's kind of, you have to choose between, and I say this all due respect, you've got to choose between making a meal and producing dog shit, because you can't, make something really good by sprinting through it.
I always like the triangle of true. That's how I call it. Fast, expensive, well. You can choose two of them.
Take your pick, because you can't have both of them. And even expensive and well, like that's quite hard to put those two together. And in that particular scenario, it was the reason probably why it was bad or most challenging was it was a collection of it was a storm of problems that came together all at once. It was 2021. It was the boom year coming out of COVID, where production was or film production, television production was running at about 230% capacity. So like we went from in 2019
Do nothing.
Well, in 2019, the end of 2019, I was told from one of the Back 2 union representatives that I believe there was around 60 films in production per day in England at any one time. And then skip forward to, I think it was either July or August the following year, 2021, and it was 200. So the amount of productivity push through and uptake on that was fucking humongous.
To be honest, COVID destroyed my first project in England. I spoke with one production company and we agreed to make Roy, one of the scripts which are doing very well on the festivals at the moment. And they had one movie in production, which one they shooting internationally in England and somewhere in Norway. And COVID hit, so all budget they had started, preparing for Roy went for to finish that movie they already had in production, because the cost of filmmaking jump astronomically. All the tests, all the precaution, 2 meters distance, everyone with the mask, and extra people on set who supposed to just watch if you keep distance and doing all these things. And they said, sorry, we will not be able to do it. And we never back to the conversation afterward.
That is a shame. That is a shame. Well, you're currently winning every damn competition I see you enter.
I'm surprised too, to be honest.
Which I'm not. I always figured that you would. I figured it would come round sooner or later. And now I think we're now in the later, where people are starting to realise the talent and the skill you have. So
thank you.
Just remember me when.
To be honest,
tell your line manager I know a guy.
It would be my best thing ever if I can do movie and start from the morning jiu-jitsu.
You must always have at least one Simon.
Simon Hayes is far away, so you have to be.
You might be a little bit out of your budget, but this Simon probably isn't. But oh man, that'd be the dream.
No, it would be great.
I love my job, so doing my job for 10 hours, and then either at lunchtime or in the mornings, I probably would get up in the mornings.
You will hate me.
I hate the mornings. You're either I'll either be a pussycat or I'm coming raging.
To be honest, when we was doing Fighter, every morning. On the first part of Fighter, it was an incredible situation because a couple of guys was preparing to MMA fights. So we had coaches on set, we had fighters on set, and we had a room in hotel especially prepared only for them to train.
Otherwise known as the Will Smith room.
Yeah.
He always has his own gym built wherever he shoots. Just has a room for himself just to go and do exercise.
It wasn't so exclusive. It was inclusive for everyone.
Right.
But in the morning, nobody was there. So every morning, me, couple of guys from the crew, and one guy from MMA fighter who was active fighting, black belt judo, very good jiu-jitsu, and 30 professional fights, and we just rule there. no-gi. It was amazing.
You must have got some good rounds in then.
Oh, it was so great.
Yeah.
And then you're going to the sets already with clean heads and make you think clear. And I love it. I want to do it again this way.
Man, count me in, please. That would be.
I do. You know
that would be the dream. I can actually train while working as well.
And they paid you for that.
Well, I mean, they don't pay for the mornings, obviously, but
no.
But it's within
In a scope of work.
I'm not having to go from like one random bit of London to another bit of London to get access to a mat after 12 hours of traveling and working. But actually just, get to work a little bit early.
Yeah.
Throw on a gi or do some no-gi. Do that 45 minutes or an hour. And then slide across to sound apartment and see what the guys are up to and get in the chair and mix away. That'd be great. I do try to exercise when I'm on set, especially if I have an hour lunch. Feature I did last year, I made a point of because I was mixing, so I sat down a lot. But with the travel, there was no way to go to a gym or even get, once you get to that 12, 13 hour mark of the day, squeezing in a training session is very, very difficult.
It's almost impossible.
Yeah, it's
especially when you're out of London.
Yeah, it's getting into the point where it's unhealthy because you're so exhausted that you just need to get, a nutritious meal in and sleep. Like you absolutely have to get sleep. But because we had the hour lunch, I would then, when everyone went to lunch, I would go straight out and do like a strict half an hour of exercise, either sprawl and brawl or running or sprints. And then as soon as that alarm went off after the half an hour, I'm done. Back, feed as quick as possible. Rest. Then you've got like 15, 20 minutes just to change out your sweats and get a drink in and then go sit in the chair. But because I'm mixing, I've got that physical time of being in a chair where I can recuperate and rest. Whereas the boom ops, I know they probably couldn't do that because, they're physically like, I call it the trenches when they're on the front line, with the focus puller and the camera op and right there with the actors. And the director peering over their shoulder and stuff. Because they never watch on Video Village. They're always just there on the side of the set, goggles on, headphones left in the toilet somewhere. Just like, oh, Jesus Christ. And then, where were my headphones? It's like, I built a clip specifically for you so you can just put them on your body and forget about it and you don't lose them, but you still managed to lose them. A little sound gripe there. But that would be excellent, man, to actually do some jiu-jitsu.
Hopefully, to be honest. Now, both of the scripts have lots of recognition and palms on it. So I hope that very soon I will back to some conversations with some producers in UK. I already had some questions from Poland, but I don't really want to go back there. It's a different world, and I don't really want to step to this place again. I want to do something here.
Well, if you can... you've got those opportunities in Poland, but once you get rolling here, once you get that start, that'll open the doors and you can use that momentum, which will then establish you here. So it's a bit harder to get started, I think. But then once you do, then Guy Ritchie that shit.
To be honest, when I come to UK and wanted to do a movie here, and I was after fighters, so I had a movie which one was #1 in Netflix. In Poland, internationally shown in Netflix, was in some festivals, and I thought, yes, every doors are open for me. And then I hit the wall, and I learned that, sorry, you don't know people here, you have to start from amazing, calling people, talk to them.
I found in the film world, I call it through the looking glass.
Oh yeah.
It's almost like there's a secret society of everyone who knows where the jobs are and knows when the jobs are coming, and they're there at the right point at the exact right time, and they get the calls first. And then there's everyone else, and then once you kind of get out of that little zone, you get stuck. But once you're in it, it's almost self-replicating. So once you break through that barrier and you get inside that little circle, it seems to, it's a law of attraction. When you're in it, you get more of it sent to you, more opportunities.
Yeah, that's basically how it was. It's gravity of work.
Yeah.
Once you have it, more work coming.
It's always the way. The amount of times I've had like no work for a month, and then I'll do one day somewhere, and as I'm on the shoot, I'll get a call on my lunch break or an email, and we need you for this day, and then okay, cool, and then at the end of the day comes, we need you for a week, as of tomorrow, for the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and then before you know it, you've worked like solidly for a couple of months, and things are good, and you've got some savings, and things are moving the right way. So, but then when it doesn't,
it's just
oh man. But then
that's the problem. We just watch the phone and waiting to start call. Just
I'm not a phone watcher. I hate that concept. For me, if I have to just sit and I've got a number of friends in my department who do that, and they hustle. I fully respect that. They generate opportunities and they're the first there. And sometimes I've missed some stuff because maybe I wasn't phone watching, but I just don't want to do that for my life. Like if I'm not cavalier, and I don't think that everyone should be hiring me because there's loads of me and there's loads of people who are at my level, but I'm at a certain skill level, and I'm at a certain point with my experience where I'm an asset. And it's not that I take it for granted, or I take people's acceptance of that for granted. But there's only so much really you can do to kind of generate that. Because for me, it's for what I do. The production sets up, then I'm attached to it. So I can't create the production unless I actually start producing or directing or writing or something.
That's my problem.
My point to that is, though, if there isn't any work there, I don't allow myself to go crazy watching a phone, because that's just it's not a fun way of living life. I then do my own thing. I make music and do jiu-jitsu and embellish and enjoy my other interests.
Why so many filmmakers doing jiu-jitsu?
I think it's a combination of things. There's a lot of technical departments doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I know. I've met a lot of people.
Because I touched on it earlier with attributes, and I mentioned the idea that I'm good in difficult situations.
Jiu-jitsu is one big difficult situation.
Yeah. Well, it was actually one of the few compliments my father paid me once. I was telling him about an horrible job I did in a forest where everything went wrong, technically and creatively. I'd been away for a month in this forest, and I came back and said, how are you? You all right? So, yeah, right. Been a bit of a shit month, and so what happened? I did the job, and the job was just nosedived into the ground, absolute plane crash. And then he'd caught me off guard. He just went silent, went, "You tend to do all right in those situations," and just walked off. It was one of those weird things where it was like, you just like,
and you just remember that.
Yeah,
stay with you.
It kind of felt like it felt like it was just dismissing me, but at the same time, it was a deep compliment as well. And I was like, you know what, he's got an actual point there, because when I really study it, as I mentioned, I'm good at having very little and creating a lot from it. And I think that's where the jiu-jitsu attraction comes from, because it's a self-replicating teacher of that situation. So like when you're in someone's side control or mount and they're 100 plus kilograms, and
they are.
And they're a good blue belt, so they're not some strong idiot, but they're actually someone who's got some talent and a bit of training behind them, and they understand what they're doing. With that, to be
honest, competition blue belts are dangerous.
Yes,
people don't realize how dangerous they can be.
And you're 4 minutes in, and they've been training 2 times a day, 4 days a week. And so
every day,
because you've been busy, your cardio's down, and you haven't been training with that intensity, but consistency as well, which is a big thing. You can't fake that. So it's that situation, and they're grinding their elbow through your jawline, and you have to ask yourself, like, all right,
why I'm here?
That's the first question. The amount of times I ask myself, like, why don't I take up golf or something? But you have to ask yourself, like, okay, am I going to quit? This is really horrible and uncomfortable. But then, the old bit of the ego kicks in. But then also you break down the situation, like, right, I'm in a lot of pain right now and a lot of discomfort. But this isn't enough to break my actual jaw. So, all right, I've got maybe another 60 seconds before this really starts to get problematic. So that means I've got 60 seconds to really try and break down the situation, break down the position, and start working on a solution. And then you start problem solving while someone's trying to murder you.
Yeah, it's the always funny part. I hate small guys in jiu-jitsu. They're amazing technically, and you really have to make muscle power to stop them.
Oh man. Well,
They don't. They are like Keenan. You know, you met Keenan.
oh yeah. He's a rare breed though.
Yes.
He's got the strength of a 100-kilogram guy, but he
He's
weighs
like 64.
yeah, it's ridiculous. There's been a few times where I've rolled with him, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this guy is skilled but strong as well. He had both ends of the spectrum, but he's absolutely tiny. But I was going to say, when those situations come up, I very much try to take the ego out of it, and instead I try to be a student of the technique, because that smaller person. I was discussing this last night with one of our blue belts who recently won a competition, and we had a roll. And she said, I need to make sure that when I roll that I get it right. And I was like, see, that's why you're so good, because she's phenomenal. She's one of the best blue belts we've got at the school, I think, at the moment. And like,
Who is that?
Alicia, I think her name is.
Okay, of course.
I think it's Alicia. It's either Alicia or Akisha.
I call her Alicia.
Yeah, I just call her Champion, because she is.
It's a good name, yeah. She is.
Champion. I mean, she's got such a great attitude.
Her brother is amazing too.
Oh yeah, they're both.
They're living in gym practically.
Ridiculous skill level for their age. But it's the mind that goes with it. It's the attitude. Like they're just like matter of fact, really polite, easygoing kids. They've already been beaten up a million times since they were 8 years old, and now it's just like you chuck them in with a 100-kilogram adult, and they play with them like they're food, because they've worked out how to. And she even said, like, I need to make sure that when I'm rolling, it has to be perfect, and kind of it reinforces the concept that when you're small, you trade off that power and that weight advantage, which means you have to be perfect. Which is why I think rolling with them is so good, because. And why I don't muscle stuff with them wherever possible, because when they are defeating you, they're defeating you with pure jiu-jitsu.
Rolling is not fighting. Rolling is learning.
Yeah.
People forgetting about that.
With a little bit of scrapping involved.
Yeah, especially when you meet old friends, you just want to show him that I've been here when you was out.
I've been getting ready for you. I've been montaging. You're at the end of the montage, on top of the hill.
But there is nothing more dangerous in jiu-jitsu than
Konrad! Well, some Russians are following me running up a snowy hill. My point is, though, their technique is going to be a good teacher, because if you can't meet them technique for technique without the extra leverage of weight and power that you have on them because you weigh more than them, then your jiu-jitsu is going to improve dramatically.
Oh yes.
Then if you can then take that skill level and put it with because we're effectively middle-sized guys, we're sitting between that 95 and 80 kilogram category.
Yeah.
So we're not very big, but we're not small enough to be in the smaller category. So we're trading techniques with guys who are technically better than us, and then trading aggression and power with guys who are a hell of a lot stronger and bigger than us. So you have to kind of bring the two worlds together wherever possible.
You know what really helps me? I try to explain technique to myself.
Man, I was at a school years ago, before I came to London, and I used to have it drilled out of me constantly, not to break down the techniques. And I used to do it not because I wanted to teach someone, but because I wanted
No, I do it for myself.
Yeah.
I teach myself.
When I came to London, I got out of that habit. I was told it was disrespectful, and it's really slowed my jiu-jitsu down. But it was only after like 2 or 3 years of being at Carson's in London where I noticed that no one has that chip on their shoulder, and everyone's actually really, really cool. And there were so many things I was seeing with my partners, and when I was drilling myself, I actually started opening up a little bit and saying, "How about you do this?" And then everyone was like, "That's fantastic! Show me more. Let's trade.
Yeah,
let's
that's how it works in Carson.
Let's deep dive this and let's make it better." And I love that aspect of it. And then,
when we're drilling,
yeah,
whenever I see my partner doing something can be improved, I'm telling him.
Yeah.
Whenever he see I do it something wrong, he's correcting me.
Yeah.
And that's work for someone. It's how it's supposed to be in jiu-jitsu. That's my understanding of that.
It's one of the quickest ways of learning.
Yeah.
So when I teach someone, I'll show them something, but then I'll hand it off to them, and I'll have them do it in front of me. And then where needed, I'll then either have them rewind to different points, but I'll coach them through correcting themselves. So then they have physically the memory of, okay, this was wrong, now this is right. I don't like the teaching method where they show you something and expect you to just go and figure it out.
Have a fun.
Yeah, it's just not very, it's like throwing you a deep end and whatever it is. Whereas if you have someone who can actually dissect it with you.
Something which stay with me, someone told me this way, that important to understand technique, important is that understand the concept of technique.
Yeah.
Like for example, swap is mean you have to remove any possible post before you push someone. So and it stayed with me. So now if I want to swap someone, first what I think, okay, I've got his hand, I've got the hook, now I can do that. I'm not doing that before I secure this points.
I consider that the or at least I self name that the rule of diagonals. So in jiu-jitsu, there's a lot of diagonals involved. So if you're doing something, or if I'm doing something with your right hand or your right side, I'll then have some anchor on your left side as well, which is going across your body. And the best example of that is back control. So if you can get an underhook, like a control on the hand on one side, then you want the opposite foot hook. Whereas if you have the same foot hook on the same side, they can dump you. And
because the side's open.
But because you've got that diagonal control of either side of their body, either top or bottom, whichever it is, then you can control them. You don't have to have everything. You can just maintain that. And if you apply that, your example was very good in that if you apply that attacking someone's base, I'm going to pull this one in, but then attack the other side from I'm going to pull your arm in and then attack the opposite leg. So that's going to be my counterbalance. I'm going to attack you here, but reduce this ability to base, and then you hit your sweep, which becomes effective jiu-jitsu. So that concept is, or the idea of concepts, I think, is stronger than just doing a technique.
We really run out from the sound. Right. So can you tell me, what was the biggest screw you had on the set? Which one you was able to fix and nobody knows?
Oh, the biggest screw up?
Yeah, biggest screw up. But the idea is you fix it, nobody knows.
That's like 60% of my job.
That's self-advertisement.
That is, I mean, without highlighting it, I kind of touched on it earlier in that I try to make sure I call my department solutions department. So when we're prepping for a job, I'm telling my team, my guys, my girls, or my sound bros and my sound lady bros, we're looking to create solutions before the problems exist. So we're going to think about what can go wrong, and then we're going to work out what the solution is. So then when it does happen, we've already got a plan in place. And I used to actively speak to some of the guys and girls I would work with on a regular basis and say, we did a job at the weekend, or we did a job 2 weeks ago. What was missing from my kit? What problems did we have? Is there anything you know that is a solution? Or if we're in the field and something goes on, then they're griping about something, and I'll ask them, how do we make this better? Is there a bit of kit missing? Is there something I can create or make that's going to make your job easier? Is there a certain labeling that will make things quicker? And it's a very kind of matter-of-fact problem-solution kind of mindset towards dealing with those things. So when it does all go wrong, it doesn't feel like it goes wrong because we've already got a solution for it. There's already something deployed or set up ready. So we'll have a backup mic set up. We just whip onto set or something, or we've already got a B mic rigged. That's probably one of the biggest things I do quite often. Is you get kind of one of the questions I'll ask a director when I start interviewing with them to get hired on a production, is what is your feel with regards to ad-libs? Because that's a big thing for my department. Because I try to educate them where possible and let them know that a microphone can only be in one place at one time. And for them, they think there's a mic in the room, then therefore something's recorded, but that's not how it works at all. If something is off mic, it doesn't exist. And moreover, it can actually impact and ruin what is on mic, because you tend to get a crossover of lines, which is a ghosting. And you can't ADR the line that you've missed on top of it, because then you have two versions of the same person speaking at the same time over someone who is on mic. And it just sounds really weird. It sounds like some dodgy sci-fi movie music effect that you've applied on some prog rock album or something. And that's not how you create consistent audio. And that's what the real goal is. Make it consistent.
Question. Do directors understand audio?
Oh, I get into a lot of trouble here.
You're talking to the director.
I've
I'm
had-
waiting.
I've had situations where I did one job with quite a well-known director, and all of his assistants, they all imposed upon me and said, such and such director knows sound, just so you know. I'm like, okay, cool. You know, first time I heard that, yeah, I hear that quite often. Then I speak to the next assistant. By the way, he knows sound, so don't worry. I'm like, okay, cool. And then speak to the next person in the
That's
chain.
not to be worried.
Yeah, he really knows sound. At that point, I'm like, why did I need to tell me this? This is a bit strange. In those situations, they will think they know sound. But the thing is, when you're directing, you're not thinking about those
No, not
minute
at all.
details. You're thinking big picture. And it's your HODs and then department in those HODs, or that feed those HODs. It's their jobs to create those details for you. And this is why it's imperative that you get a team that you like, that you trust. Because you know that when they tell you something, it's like a word from God, if you will, if you're going to be religious about it. But the point is, you can trust that when they say that isn't a problem, even though you think, oh, it might be, you know that they are an expert at what they do. And if they've said it's fine, it is fine. You can just sign it off in your head and move on. And you know that if they reckon it's good, then when you get to that edit suite, that it's going to be fine. But when they say, no, this isn't good, there's more here, we need to make an adjustment, instead of just dismissing them, you know, you take that 30 seconds, go, right, what is it and how can we do it better? Because in the film world, you have to have a solution. And if you don't have a solution, there's no point spending time on it. Whereas if something goes wrong and then someone says it went wrong because of this and we have this, let's do it again, but with this adjustment, then that's a productive use of the time. And then it's a productive reason to go back and do that again. So when I get told a director, to end that story, that director, he had an idea of how sound works, but he wasn't thinking about sound in his decisions. He just knew what it did, and he knew if you leave him alone with a microphone, he's going to get a good recording. But the thing is, he's not alone with a microphone. He's doing 5 other things. So then when he says he knows sound, it's not connecting with what he's actually doing. So therefore, what he insists is correct is usually because I kind of bleeped myself out there. It's usually terrible because they're not actually focused on what's going on with that specific detail. And then
it's not their job.
I have to tell them, hey, you know, this is actually pretty crap. And they're like, no, you don't sound, I know sound. Great, good for you. It's crap still. It doesn't matter because you're off doing this, which is what you're meant to be doing. And I'm doing this, which is what you've employed me to do. So instead of just dismissing me, acknowledge the investment you're making in my role, whether it's me or anyone else doing my job. You're paying us a damn good wage. You know, we're not there just to hang out and be talked down to by some idiot. You know, we're there to make something good for you or collect something good for you. So if it is wrong, you know, and we tell you,
this means it's wrong.
Yeah, you should probably listen to us. With that said, I mean, we've had a couple of questions there on, you know, what was the bad things that went wrong and so on. I've noticed, like, one of the things in my department, in sound department for film, TV, it's kind of a well-worn cliche, the expectation that when sound speaks, it's a problem. Like, there's a plane, there's a leaf blower in the background, there's a car went through the line. We're always talking about the problems we have. And I feel that there's a real negative connotation to that because, you know, when we speak, it's always with bad news. Therefore, we're avoided, which is terrible because most sound people are pretty awesome and lovely.
Yeah.
We love our jobs. And
Do not kill messenger.
Yeah, man. Exactly. Oh, there's a sound issue. You need to fix it. No, it's a locations problem. There's creating the sound problem.
That's why we're shooting on air power.
Yeah, I didn't create that problem. If you wanted me to, you know, if you conferred with me, I would have told you that, and then we would have figured something else out. But that's not the thing. You've dismissed me. Therefore, this isn't a sound problem. It's a location problem. My point to that is I try to, wherever possible, reinfuse positivity with the director, with producers as well, with my department. So instead of just being silent, there's quite often where my first and second, when I have the luxury of having a second, they'll absolutely nail a scene. And when they do, it's just, my ears bleed with joy. It's so good, man. When you watch a shot, a wide or a close up, but then all the stuff that's off screen is on mic, and you're actually mixing the scene, it sounds finished. And I tell the director, scene ends. I'm like, did you hear that? And they're like, what was the problem? I said, no. Did you hear that? Did you hear the scene? It's like, you have to tell them. There wasn't any problems. It was just really fucking good. Like, it sounded beautiful. Like, the performance, the nuances and all the stuff that the performers are doing, the actors, like, it's all there, the emotion. And it's there in that one take. Like, you can almost not bother recording anything else because you can just cut it from this. It's that good. And then like, oh, right. And then for the next hour afterwards, they're intensely listening to everything you're recording after that. And quite often then they'll actually engage in that, in my department and what we're doing, and they'll actually start looking at the details of what we're doing. And then they're listening to the performance as well as just watching it. And I think that's massively important and quite often gets overlooked, because listening to the words that are being spoken by the actors, because that's the juice. That's my job. The words, we get other sounds on set, but it's the dialogue. And when they're hearing that dialogue being performed, and you're hearing the emotion, the transference, and the crossover with characters,
people don't realize how important sound is for a movie.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this earlier, in that, say you have a scene, and I'll describe a little example for you. It's a guy, he walks through an office, slams down a big file of papers, and then kicks a monitor off a desk and looks angry. In that scene, you don't have any dialogue. So if you were to record it without any sound, or even if you had just a basic scratch track of a boom in the room, just picking it up, which is usually what we do anyway with that. But then in the editing, you'd have the backdrop, the ambience, if you will, of that office. Phones going off, keyboards being tapped, people rhubarbing off in the background, that murmur. Then you have the footsteps of the guy walking into the scene, boop, 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 boop. And then you have like the file being slammed down on the desk, and you hear the thickness of the paper, and then you see the foot come up and smash the screen. So you have a little electric bit of Foley, bit of sound design, and then the screen hits and a little smash sound. So you can address a lot of that in post, or embellish it, really amp it up. But what you can't do in post very well is the scene before, where that guy is in an office, say, with the chief of police, and the police, says you can't go after the main suspect from the murder of your daughter because you're too close to the case, and that guy's angry and he wants to go out and get him, and they don't quite have the evidence yet, but he knows he's the guy and he's going to go kill again, and he killed his family member, so he wants revenge, but he can't get revenge because he's professionally entangled, so he's angry. And recording, you can't Foley that dialogue in. You can ADR it, which is the classic term for that, but recording that scene live on set, in a proper room, with two booms, proper radios set up, and getting that transference when they're shouting over each other and there's that aggressive, emotional, impactful exchange between them, and doing it live on the day when the actors are going, I call it full beans, if you will, like all the way. They're giving it to each other and it's on screen. That moment is so hard to recreate in post, in ADR, getting them in separately to like go over their lines and then
back to the emotion.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's never as real. It's never as genuine.
I always love the sound of dialogue record on set. It's just better.
It just feels right. It's the actual performance of the actors.
The worst part is what I noticed, that if you have a scene and something went wrong in a small part, and you record this part in studio and try to match it, you just feel different emotions straight away.
It's not right. It's not right. Which is like you touched on earlier, like what are the things you've gone wrong that you fixed without anyone knowing. And again, my answer was, that's most of my job. So, for instance, getting into technical terms for filmmaking now, say we're doing a shot reverse. So we're doing a single camera shoot, but we're into close-ups. Yeah. Similar to what we've got here, where, you're framed on me here, and then you're framed on you there with that camera. So this would be a medium shot reverse. And then we're having a two-way conversation, but the one camera's on you, you're talking away. So we'll have one boom on you, but then the other guy who's off screen starts ad-libbing or talking over that person. So we try to get another mic on the person off screen, and quite often I'll work with the AD team and I'll work with the actors to say, right, you're not in this shot, you're not on camera, so we're going to have this mic in this position. Bear in mind, for safety, it's here, but it's set up in such a way that's safe for you to do your work. But instead of going crazy and all around, just minimize your movements so you're on mic. The reason being, when they're in post and they have that beautiful crossover ad-lib where they're talking over each other, but the guy off screen says something that isn't scripted, that triggers something on screen, but the dialogue recording is mixed together, they don't have to go in and loop that because I've recorded it in such a way where it's perfectly usable. Like the right mics are in the right place at the right time, which means that beautiful ad-lib moment isn't thrown away in the bin or it doesn't have to be reconstructed. It's already there because in my off lines, it's captured. And then inversely, if something goes wrong with a shoot, if something goes wrong with a particular take, say there's like take 3 where the look in your eyes of an actor is beautiful, it's quite close, but a plane went through that one moment.
Always does.
Yeah, fucking hell. Aviation, damn it.
Or dogs.
Dogs are, I was going to refer to RF ducks. Never trust ducks, man. They'll soak up all your radio signal. Anyway, say a plane goes through that moment, but the intensity of that close up is there. That's what you want, that look. But we've done 3 takes before that. You can then take that recording from another take for that specific line and put it in and match, adjust the timing slightly with editing, but match it. But because we have those extra lines, we have those extra ammo for the dialogue editor, they can then make that adjustment and make that shot work with the recording from set. So it doesn't sound like you're dropping ADRing. You still got the same intensity from the performance within that moment. So yeah, we try to generate solutions for post without anyone knowing. Just arm them with extra stuff. So when it gets into that situation, they've already got they've already got the problem solved.
So what was the scene or part of the movie which one you are the most proud of? Ooh. Everyone have something like that. Which one is like really, really proud that you did it? You accomplished this part which one you didn't know or didn't believe it would be good, but it's amazing.
That's a good question. It probably breaks down into a few different categories because I've done music for film as well as recording the onset sync sound, if you will, and then I've also done editing, so dialogue editing, sound design, and mixing, and they literally are 3 different categories.
Yes, they are.
And I'd have an example for each one of those. I've probably got quite a few. The easiest one for me for music, which is my primary passion, like if you took everything else away from me and said just do music for films,
you're still happy.
Man, that would be I would very much enjoy that. Get closer to my mouth. Join me.
Come.
Oh, we've nudged this. Is that still framed?
Yeah, perfect. You are. Don't worry.
I did a film years ago for a director, writer, producer team. This couple that literally did an entire feature film, just those 2 doing nearly everything. And when I say that, I don't say that negatively because what they achieved was phenomenal. Like when the director was also the camera operator as well. Him and his girlfriend, they produced within them, they produced within their means. So when they wrote a scene and when they spec'd and planned to do the scene, they knew the shots they wanted, but they also made sure that it was within realistic terms of being able to do within their limited budget and incredibly limited crew. Mm-hmm. So they were good filmmakers. They knew how to make the film with the limited resources they had, and they were very limited resources. But after a number of, it's a long story in itself why I ended up doing the music for it, but I did the music for their film. I got invited to come back and score the feature after recording it on set in the moors in Cornwall in the winter, which was horrible. Oh man, I was so cold. But that's probably my biggest achievement with regards to doing music, and the thing I'm most proud of, because the score is very consistent all the way through, but more more to the point. Like I nailed every scene that I did music cues for. Like it didn't detract from the film. It incredibly enhanced it, and it added nuances and steered the audience emotionally where we wanted them to go, and then brought up details or made you focus on details without actually just being exposition, which is always the worst thing in film. It really made you emotionally sit into the film and invest in it, which was I'm incredibly proud of that. It came out really well, and considering it's just me with a computer and with as little training as I had, it sounds great, man. I thought it was good. A film called All in the Valley. So if you're curious about that, look that up.
Everyone can find it.
I'll give you a link, and
Yeah.
people can check it out in the. If you go in the description, there'll be an example there, and you can judge for yourself. But that's one of my favorite things because it turned out very well, and I did a lot of work on it. I spent a lot of time thinking about it and generating it, and then when it finally went to picture, it was something I was very proud of.
Something I noticed is that whenever you have everything you need, you're killing your creativity.
That is that is a very good point.
When I was doing Fighter, on the first part of the movie, we had everything we can imagine. We're just doing the script.
Yeah.
On the second part of the movie, the money almost gone. We had to think what we're doing, why we're doing, what is important, what we can skip it, and what we have to, fight for. And lots of the scenes are better than on the second part of the movie than on the first one. The pictures is nice. Sorry, the pictures is nicer on the first part because we had all the gadgets, but the acting and what's happening is better on the second part of the movie.
Perhaps that then, because I think a lot of times people mistake resources for laziness. So, for instance, when you've got no one else to help you make something, you're doing everything on your own, you don't get the opportunity to focus on those details. But then when you have heads of department that you trust and you can just delegate, which is ultimately where directors should be aiming to be. I mean, I think it's good to go down to get in the trenches and get dirty sometimes because that experience helps you and informs you. But ultimately, you want to find yourself in a situation where you've got trusted hands at different parts of the ship, so you can just say the direction, which is director. At which point is that the interpretation of the experience of feeling like, oh, I don't have to be super intensely focused because a lot of the small things that are, nuts and bolts have already been taken care of. So it's not as intense. Or is it because of the intensity of the situation where you don't have as much that you'll then focus more on specific things, which makes you think like you're getting more out of it? Like, where do you think that would fall on that?
For me, it works this way. When resources are cut and you have to really think about the scene and what is important in it, you rethink the scene during the rehearsal with the actors. When you've got everything you ask for, you don't think about these things. You just have scene on the paper.
Right.
You do it rehearse. You discuss with the actor what's the problem of the scene, what you want to show them directions you want to go for. Put some stuff on the emotion. Can you make stronger this, less this? Going with designing the scene. But when resources are cut from you, you need to find what is important, what really is important, how you can show it the best way with the resources you've got. And sometimes you're changing the scene because of lack of resources, and you find out that this what you achieve is better than the original scene which you had on paper.
Right. Now, I guess the real kicker would be trying to figure out how to get that mindset with the resources.
I think it's hard, especially if you are not very, very experienced. Like for me, Fighter was my first movie, and when they gave me everything I asked for, I was like, wow, that's how filmmaking looks like. And the other thing is I had to learn how to work on big set. what they want to do with me, they just put me to the small tent with the screens, close me, separate me from everyone, that I can focus on what I see on the screen.
Yeah.
I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I
You
didn't
wanna
find.
You want to be peering over the boom op's shoulder, don't you? And
You don't believe, but
sidelines
yes. So, and
I've worked with many directors who have that same passion.
we had a couple of guys on the set, and there was, they was just helping, and they noticed that I hate it, but because I was explained by all the great filmmakers that's how I'm supposed to work as a director. I was just sitting in this fucking tent and watch the screens, and just, it was like frustration in me that I want to be there. I want to see what they're doing. I want to correct them. I want to speak with them. Feel the energy there. So the guys noticed that, and in one scene they built a small set for me next to the camera. There was one screen,
Camera's monitor,
camera's monitor,
the Nintendo Switch.
kind of, put my seat there, and they asked, Konrad, do you want to try? I went there. I absolutely love it. I've been there. I see what I have to see. I had sound in my ears. I see what cameras see, and I'm there. I don't have to send someone or talk through the radio to change something. I'm just there.
No, I think, ironically, they're both actually right and they're both wrong, for the exact reasons you've just presented. There are certain scenarios and certain setups where you do need to have a little bit of separation, because there's so much going on.
I agree, especially with
Circus
big scenes.
Big scenes, multiple cameras.
Yeah.
You got like 3-4 cameras flying. You got to have eyes all over the place.
The final of the fighter was like that. I just moved all my place far away from them, but still not to the town, not hide somewhere. The place where I can easily go to the set if I want to. But where I was shooting the fighting on the ring between the two guys, I cannot be there. I just have to be behind somewhere farther. We had 3 cameras in one moment, so I had 3 screens. But I didn't have all these people behind me. And that helps tremendously, because we create for them separate place. Because everyone wants to see what's going on with the cameras. Every department have to.
So you got the MUAs checking out the costume department there.
On the beginning, I had everyone behind my back.
Yeah,
I wasn't able to focus.
It crowds too much. But then,
I understand. To be honest, I fully understand why they've been there. They did their job. They have to see if there is any problem to fix it. And I don't see these problems. I don't focus on their problems.
Yeah, that's thing you touched on there. You couldn't focus within there. I think there's like 2 ends of that. On one end, it's a case of working on yourself and trying to really knowing how to dial yourself in so you can disregard that because it's not really an outside interference. It's not even interference, but that presence. But then the other side of it is acknowledging the workflow of what you're doing and knowing, if I can get rid of that, it's going to make my job easier. So why don't we just figure out a way where they can go somewhere else and I can be here? You've touched on it. You didn't have a massive amount of experience shooting as a director with that level of production, but like now you've got an idea, and I think maybe going into the next one, it would be worthwhile taking.
We'll compete a different way.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it'd be worthwhile just taking an afternoon, like literally put an afternoon aside and visualize like the set, and visualize how you might want to work, and actually go through the scenarios in your head, like if I'm in Video Village, or if I'm on the sidelines, or if I've got this kind of monitor, or if I've got a thing on wheels, what would be better for me, so where I can get what I need to. But then also you've got to assess the type of production. So if you're doing Titanic 2, like you can't necessarily be on the deck.
You can go down there.
But if you're doing When Harry Met Sally, you're almost going to have a chair next to Meg Ryan. So it's going to be depending on.
No, to be honest, I found that it have to be balanced. It have to be depend the scene. What is the energy of the scenes? What you have to be where you are need. Because not always director next to the camera and actors is the director who helps them. Sometimes it can be directors who disturb them. But in many situations, at least me, especially I learned that during the fighter, on the second part of the fighter, I'm coming closer or further from the set, depend what energy I want to have it on it.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I see that I'm far and energy is as it should be, and actors doing their job, and everyone feel the energy and it's going well, do not disturb.
Yeah.
Do not. I know that you want to direct it. You want to go there and tell them, guys, do this more. This. Don't disturb them.
The
Make them do
dinosaurs
it.
in the park are the main attraction. Let them be dinosaurs.
Exactly.
But if the animatronics aren't working, get in and fix those damn things.
Exactly. That's how it works for me. On this, after I used to, I took my lesson, I took my experience, and it works very well after. And things I noticed, the actors was very happy with that. Like they back to me after it, and they told me that was good, Konrad. That was great. We'd like to work this way. If you're happy with what you've got.
Have you that's actually a good question. Have you had much thought or much attention, or have you given much thought and attention to the process with your actors? So having those little feedback sessions, is that something you would build into your next film?
What I'm doing at the moment, and what I did on the second part of the fighter, is once we discuss the scene, we do it rehearse on the set, we're going through it, we're correcting, we're shooting. After the first or second take, I want to have short, like few seconds break with actors, adjust them, tell them something nice, what they're doing nice, before I tell them something which I don't like it. And give everyone feedback. I think they needed feedback. I noticed that once someone did everything correct. The actress, she did a great job in the scene. Like, I had nothing to ask more, so I didn't give her feedback. And she was worried. She was thinking that I don't care about her as a director. That I care about the other actors. I'm talking to them. I just didn't talk to her because she was great. She didn't need to be adjusted, but she need to hear that.
I've been around them a lot, but managing actors, performers, I've heard the term herding cats, which I think is a thing. But it's something you've got to bear in mind, because some of them come with a lot of confidence, but a lot of them, while they have confidence, what they do is
it's not always confidence. To be honest, sometimes, and I, as a director, I've been around actors a lot. I noticed that they want to be seen as a people with the full of confidence, but often they don't have it inside them. You have to help them feel that they are confident. Sometimes you have to, punish them, but mostly you have to put this confidence up front. You have to make them feel that everyone knows that they are confident, even if they are not.
I suppose you're getting into, for me, for what we do, and a lot of technical crew say, right, that, that light's in the way, it's bugging me. I need to get a mic in a different position where I can get this dialogue without blocking that light and casting a shadow on someone's forehead. So you're looking at something technically. But I guess you're almost like you're having to engage in some almost advanced psychological warfare. But then also not warfare, welfare as well. Simultaneously balancing all these things. But then, if you get the casting right, you don't even need to do that. You turn up, give each other a nod, ask how the cricket game was at the weekend, and that's it, because they're so on point and dialed in. And others, you got to hold their hand for every sentence.
When I was in film school in London, in Raidens, love this place, one of the teachers, the working director, he told us this way: you making movie before you start to make movie, before you go to the set. As much work you put for preparation, understanding of the scene, right casting, that's 70% of your work.
Yeah.
If you do it, if you make right decisions during this process, everything will be okay. Don't worry.
It enables you to make the film.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things I found interesting, what you said a moment ago, with regards to when the resources were reduced and you felt like you were getting better work because the intensity was actually, there was more impetus on getting more out of less.
But those, we know that we have less. We have to prepare for that better.
You gotta, I call that cutting the fat. So you're not just there with all the trimmings and letting actors ad lib for an extra 20 minutes on every take. And so no, we've got a story to tell. I want to give you 3 extra seconds per take, do something or add something, but it's got to be on this line because we've got to move on and tell the rest of the story. And this in the script serves the purpose. So we need to make sure that master's happy before anything else can happen. And once that master is happy, we move on because there's a lot of master to make happy.
Yes, it is.
When you have those situations where there isn't enough, so you really have to focus and be laser focused with it.
On my point of view, is for me as a director, important is understanding the story of movie, the story you're telling, to the point when you understand every single scene as a reason for the story. And we had a situation that we was running out of the time, and we had to drop the scene. And we know it about that in the morning. Already in the morning, I know that that one scene will not be shot this day.
Yeah.
And we don't know if we will be able to shoot it later on. And I had to think what I can drop it, or which part of the scene I can drop it, like part of this one, part of this one, part of that one, that the story will be still, tell, and we can progress with, go further. Because we know that the next day we're starting the big scenes in the studio, the fighting and everything.
Right.
But we have to start on this particular time because there's people don't realize filmmaking when you have a budget doesn't look like filmmaking when you don't have a budget. People don't start and finish when you say. They are lots of timings. You cannot start shooting if the people don't have, if I remember, 10 hours of break. There's lots of things which you have to apply for it. So if you finish at 11 evening, you cannot start 8 morning. You have to be 9 morning.
Yeah.
Simple.
The timings will change. Everything has to be adjusted accordingly.
And that was the reason why we had to drop the scene, because we know that we will not be able to finish. And I dropped the scene, and the movie still swim. There was no problem with it for the movie. I knew that this particular moment, if that will be not there, but will be explained in the next scene very shortly by some sound, it will go smoothly.
And see, that's an example of efficient filmmaking. So you can, instead of having like a 5-minute scene with some exposition and a clear massive shot of an airplane landing or something, you can just open up with the sound of an airplane landing, and then you cut to someone walking down a thing.
Kind of.
You can cut that 3 or 4 minutes of fat, which some films, I think some big films probably need.
Oh yes, especially the 4 hours movies when. If you really put to the meat of the movie, you have 1.5 hour movie.
I like long films. I've always enjoyed long films because I've always enjoyed like the Ridley Scott kind of methodology of world building, and I like the idea of going on a journey with the characters within that world, because I think that makes it adds so much texture. Because and I think films last longer. And by that I mean they have a life after the film is finished. So when that storyline is finished, because the world is so textured and dense, there's so much stuff that you can imagine happening in it. You get all this fan fiction and ideas of what could happen, and all the possibilities opened up within it.
Agree, but, and there's always but on my side, if you have a scene, if you cut and like 2 minutes from it, and 2 minutes is a lot, people don't realize how big it is, and you still have the scene, you have to really think, do you want this to have this 2 minutes in it? Is this 2 minutes make anything better for your movie, or it just making the movie longer without any reason?
No, you see,
and it happens sometimes.
I think there's a lot of pluses and minuses there. As someone who serves the technical aspect of film quite a lot, and someone who believes massively in efficiency, like I like to make sure that my one stride in a step covers 2 miles, because it's done efficiently. It's enough to do more than it needs to. But there's many examples of where you can cut too much. Now,
yes, of course.
I've done a number of short films in the past where
we have a friend here.
We've got some friends in the house. I did a student film, for instance, many, many, many years ago. I was employed to score it, and they sent me a 12-minute cut, and they had a week to basically finish this thing and then present it to some competition they were doing at the end of the week. So I had a week to score it. So they sent me this 12-minute cut. I had a whole bunch of notes from the director. I would like this, this, and this, and this. And I was hired because of my particular style, which is something we'll touch on later. I think it's an important point to make for directors when they're considering music. But so I did a score. I put it together. And as far as I was concerned, right, this is it. This is a lock cut. I was told it was locked. Picture lock is there. So this is my score. And then like 2 or 3 days before their film was due to be shown, I get another cut with like 2 minutes hacked out of it. And then like 1,000 words of editorial from the director on the score. And my God, I nearly lost my I nearly lost my dog on that one. I'm trying not to swear. I nearly threw my spoon out of the cup. He hired me for a particular style, and then all his notes were saying, I don't want this style.
So why he hired you?
Exactly. I think to be specific about that thing, about that particular situation, the director was of Indian descent, and he hired me because he wanted like a Hans Zimmer kind of stuff. Which, that's me all day long. Hans Zimmer's the G. Is my personal favorite composer. I think John Williams is the best overall, but Hans is my favorite. I love his stuff so much. So he hired me for that, and I was doing stuff, and I had lots of examples of that. So I was like, this is right up my street. This is perfect. And because there was like an Islamic theme in the film, I think they were from Indian descent. So I did a lot of research on instrumentation and sounds from that region of the world, and stuff that would be linked to Islamic faith. So I could give, I wouldn't say it's authentic, but I could certainly lean towards it and make it feel like it would fit in with that storyline and those characters in that world. But while also doing it through my style that I was hired to do. So that's what I did. And then when the director came back with all these notes, it was like, really, I want this to be on the nose, and I want big hit here, and this should be really dramatic. And I was like, that's completely that's not what I was hired to do. That's the opposite. And then it occurred to me that the director there was nothing wrong with him, and he wasn't being mean. It's just in that moment of editorial on that, he didn't hire the right person because he didn't acknowledge the reality that he'd spent most of his life watching Bollywood films. And that's not to say, they're good or bad. I don't enjoy them. But my point is, his conditioning for what to listen out for with music cues and how they work came from different. That, which is completely different to a Western style of composing, like Hans Zimmer style. It's not on the nose. It's not overly dramatic or like very theatrical. It's more supplementary and world building versus.
To be honest, the sound in Bollywood movies, like they're acting.
Oh yeah,
it's much.
But because they only had a couple of days and they'd also cut like 2 minutes out, I had to restructure the score. But then I also had to say, look, these cues are basically done. There is no way I'm changing everything. That you've hired the wrong guy for this. So you basically now, I'm going to finish my job. I'm going to finish it to spec to what I was hired to do, a week ago. And I don't mean that maliciously. It's just if I have to reinvent the wheel now. I'm going to give you one scene that you're going to be happy with, and then you've got another 8 minutes of no music. So it's better that I just finish what I was doing in the way that I was originally hired to do it, and do that to a really high quality. You hand that in, and then you've got a film that's completed and actually is coherent, than me trying to reinvent the wheel and we go back and forth for like 5 days trying to fix this when we're already past the point where it's overdue anyway and it doesn't work. So that's what I ended up doing, and that was a big lesson for me at the time, because whenever I did score composing after that, like my first question for directors was, have you heard my music? And it's not because like it's an ego thing. It would be like,
no, I just want to be sure that they know what they're taking,
because it is very similar to casting an actor.
Oh yes, it is.
Because if you just give someone a role and you don't see them try and embody or give a first preview of what they might do with a certain role or a certain character, and then you're on set and it's wrong, you're like, oh Jesus, I bought this and this is terrible. You've got to have an idea. So then whenever I worked from directors or with directors from now on or then on, it was I'd say, look, here's a bunch of my music, go and listen to it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
If you can't hear, when you listen to my music, if you can't picture your film, I'm not the guy, or I'm not the girl, or I'm not whomever. I'm not the right person. And that's not It's to protect both of us, but it's just being very, very real. Like
Yeah.
if my style doesn't invoke your film in your mind, then
That's the wrong style.
yeah. But then if you do hear like 2 or 3 of my tracks and you're picturing your scenes, I'm in. I'm the guy. Hire me. Like book me now. Get me in your diary and let me start building ideas, because that means I am the right person. And the quicker I get started, the better, because I can start really building ideas and gestating them out. Anyway, to finish the story from earlier, the editor got back to me afterwards, and he wrote me a 1,000-word email. But instead of it being editorial, it was actually a point by point of how the score that I finished worked, and every goal and everything I wanted to achieve was like they picked up on it without me telling him. It's like this did this, and this did this, and this brought this relationship together, and this little bit denoted the bad guy and the look, and this did this, and the bomb happened here, and the little break here with the piano or the weird woodwind sound that gave us that idea that this was going to happen. And it was almost like a readout of like, oh, this guy gets it. Like I made the right decision by telling the director to hold fast and basically disappoint the director for the better service of the film. And that's not really something you necessarily want to do, but when I did that, I also learned that it's not an ego leverage thing, but it's sometimes, I'm really focused on getting a certain cue to work for many reasons, and I'll be so deep in those details. And on the whole, the director needs to feel it and they need to understand it, but there are a number of times where I've been doing that and they're missing the point on something. Their mind's off somewhere else, and I'm like, this is actually the best way to do this scene. And then I'll do like 4 other versions. I'm not really sure this is working. What do you reckon we should do? Version number 1, that's the one. And they put it back in, they're like, oh yeah, okay, you're right. And then when I test an audience, they get it, like all the specific things they're trying to translate or communicate for the scene, or have a character emerge or something, or whatever they're trying to accomplish, like it's there. And sometimes you just need to stand your ground and go, it's not that you're wrong, it's more that I'm right on this one. But it's not an ego thing. I've really studied it and I've really thought about this. And then there are other music cues where I put it together and I'm like, I'm not sure about this, and I'll show it to a director. And I always tell them, like, just tell me what you think. Like, if it's not even a case of you do or don't like it, it's a case of does it work
Or not.
Yeah, and
That's something which a lot of people don't understand, that it's not always what you like is right for the scene.
yeah, that's a big thing. And it's about creating the communication to do that. And it can be heartbreaking sometimes. There have been a couple of scenes where I've done something really specific for them, and they've either cut the scene and changed the pacing, and I'm like, oh man. And that's something I think it's touching on the larger topic that we're talking on, which is cut the fat or keep the fat. I've got a good example with Tarantino that I'll get to in a moment, but
That's what I want to hear.
I've had many instances where someone's given me a cut on something and it's a bit loose, and they're like, "Oh, don't worry, we're going to cut it down." I'm like, "No, let me score it first, or let me get the temp cues going first, or the first version, because that long shot that is really fucking long, and it's you're watching it and you're almost feeling like your life is slipping away because you're staring at this very long shot. If I put the right bit of music behind that long shot is going to feel like a beautiful breath of fresh air, or it's going to feel like a build to something, because the music can impact it and change it so much." And
Okay, but now you're going into the tempo in movie.
exactly.
Something I hope I understand as a director.
Yeah.
And I know that you cannot just hit with the action or speed up. You need to slow down somewhere. You have to speed up somewhere. You have to slow down. The movie need to go like the river. Have to go slow part and fast part.
Peaks and troughs, but you also have to be self-aware as well.
You have to know why you're doing that.
Yeah, and it's not just like here's a grid, make the film to it. It's a case of what's going on in the story. Yeah. And one of the best examples of that, and I've been watching them quite a lot recently, is Tarantino films. And there's endless little moments he puts in his films where, as a filmmaker who knows what I'm looking at, I'm like, that would be cut by anyone else. But he's leaving that in. And I'm so glad he did, because you get that little 20 seconds of living with a character or a moment that makes it feel not necessarily real, but you get to see some of that world and you get to live in some of that world and share that moment with what's going on in the film.
So, to be honest, one of the best things which are in my movie happened after the scene was over. I just didn't stop camera.
Yeah. As a boom up, I used to hear that. Like an extra 20 minutes.
No, not as long, but we had a scene when we had to unfortunately kill one actor with few reasons. He wasn't able to be in the rest of the movie, and it was a long story. But short way.
No sequel for that guy.
No, he's dead.
He did, but then who's dead in what nowadays?
Everyone came back. You see Marvel.
Jesus.
But so we had new bad guy in the movie, and everything happened in the car warehouse. There was a few guys there. He's supposed to be intimidated. Just go there and show that I am the worst asshole in this whole world, and you will be scared.
The primary anus.
Yeah, primary one. And once he finished his lines and he showed, how scary guy he is, I didn't stop camera, and he started to improvise.
Hey,
it was amazing.
The sauce was there.
Everything was there. The actors was confused. They didn't know what's going on, and you see on their eyes, they watch on each other what's going on. Like they're really scared. And the guy, he went back. He took saw, and he almost wanted to cut other actor's hand. Of course, he didn't do that, but the young actor, he almost pissed himself. Was so scared.
Oh man!
And then I said, "Cut."
I've seen that a few times, and I've seen it go wrong.
No, it didn't go wrong. It was amazing.
I mean, when I say wrong, I mean they went too far. The actors were allowed to just exist within that moment a bit too far, and then they left reality on the other side of the camera and lived a different life for a couple of moments. And
the consequence of that can be very bad. I know. Oh, no. Well, at least I hope that if I see something's going wrong, I'm stopping, even during the middle of the scene.
Well, when I say that, I don't necessarily mean it's always dangerous.
But sometimes it's mentally wrong.
Yeah.
And you have to judge, as a director, you have to judge that as well, because it's not like we finish the scene and we reset minds. We finish the scene, but the actors are in emotion, and you have to shoot another scene with completely different emotion. You have to judge if this emotion from this scene, will they take that to another one? Will they be able to reset it, or put the right emotion for the next scene? And if the emotion inside them is too strong, unnecessary for that scene we're shooting at the moment, maybe you just have to little bit slow down.
That's I mean, there's so many things to juggle on that.
Of course, that's
part of it is the actors themselves, because
they are emotional creatures.
They are. I mean, they're doing. They emotional scientists.
To be honest, they've been paid for that.
My point is, there are some actors who go method.
Oh yeah,
and quite often, like, the method is just an ego's way of replacing actual technical skill. And then you tend to find it with, I would say a lot of Americans, but a good number of Americans tend to do that.
Be methods.
And actors seem to like look up to it to some kind of like hero's way of acting, and it's a bit dumb. And then you have like tradecraft actors. It's not that they can turn it on and off within seconds, but inside a minute they can embody a character, do the scene, and you've got all the nuances,
and go out of it.
And then a couple of seconds after that cut, like they're someone completely different, which is themselves, back to normal operation.
And now imagine that you are a director and you have two different actors like that on the set, and you have to somehow make it work.
I've seen that so many times.
Me too.
There's immediately there's 10 different examples in my head just popping off really hard. And I've seen the casting of that put together as well, where I thought it was a bit of a clash in real life, but then to the director's credit, he casted it specifically for those differences, because they played into the characters themselves. I was like, this actually makes a lot of sense, especially when you see it on screen.
Yeah, that's okay. To be honest, on the end, you are judged by only one thing. what is on the screen.
I used to say this to a friend of mine, or one of my buddies who I started doing this stuff with years and years and years and years and years and years, all the way back at the beginning, Hand Island days. When something would go wrong, like his answer to it would be, "Oh, don't worry, we'll just leave it. The audience will find it cute." And maybe I was a bit intense at the time, but I used to like yell at him, and we used to argue about it, like the cats and dogs. And he's a very good friend of mine. And the amount of times I really feel bad that we argue, I was like, "Why? I don't give a fuck." Like, we're arguing about that. We're not arguing because I hate you.
Yeah.
We're arguing because
that's the topic of this conversation.
That's what I'm passionate about. Like, you can call me an asshole all day long about that if you want. It doesn't matter to me. Like, what matters is we get it right, especially when I'm doing it for free. If it's free, it's got to be fucking good.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, there's no point in me being there otherwise. But my point is, like, his solutions to things going wrong and not being quite right was the audience would just think it's cute or fun. And it's like, no, because the audience judges you on what they see and hear.
Yeah.
And if they're seeing and hearing shit, it's just simply shit.
Even worse it is, the audience judge you for they thinking what they see, but they kill you for what they hear.
Yeah. And this is another thing.
They don't even most of the audience don't even recognize that 70% their judge is coming from the sound sometimes.
This is quite a common thing. Although people are starting to learn it, a more convoluted example I had when I was doing a film years ago, earlier on in my career. I had a director and he didn't give a flying monkey about sound. And we had problems in sound at times where I was quite new and I was still learning myself. So I was making mistakes technically with the kit that didn't enable my job. I was hindering myself with that. So there's a lot of ownership on that. But then I was still very early in my career, and what they were paying, they got more than what they were paying for anyway.
That's okay then.
My point is, though, we were talking about it with the director a couple of weeks in, and at this point, like, being overly polite with each other had dropped. And he was a cool guy, man, which is my point. We could actually just be honest about stuff. And I tell him, like, sound on set, what I'd noticed was almost like to put it in like an American cliche term, say you've got like a really pretty girl, she's the cheerleader squad, all the nerds want to date her, the jock dates her, all the families think she's wonderful and sweet and all this other stuff, and she's really pretty and but then she's got a younger sister who's a bit nerdy, doesn't worry about her appearance, is just more focused on reading and writing and doing something that she's really passionate about, really educating herself, and maybe slightly socially awkward. But then, so everyone just ignores her, or they don't want to go to prom with her. They want to go to prom with the cheerleader. And then, 5 years passed, and suddenly that cheerleader who didn't really focus on her grades and her education, coasted on her looks. And I don't mean that to be disparaging, but it's a cliche and it's there for a reason because it's been done a million times. 5 years later, you date them, or you meet up with them again or something, and you realise that they don't really grow past being a teenager. There's not much there. There's not much going on. But then you bump into her sister.
And she's amazing.
And not only does she become like really beautiful, but she's this amazingly deep textured person who has just ridiculous amounts of ideas and super interesting to talk to. But she remembers you from high school and she knows how you dismissed her. And suddenly she's your prime attraction, but you're just some asshole who dismissed her and that didn't pay her attention when the time was right. Whereas that one guy that saw the potential and saw like how cool they can be and how cool they were and how cool they will be, many years later they have really fond memories of them and a really positive infusion. It's a weird esoteric example, but it happens in sound and for film, because quite often sound is like, don't worry, we'll just ADR it, we'll do it in post.
No.
And a lot of productions don't have that luxury. Like, that is a solution that comes from the top down in the industry, not the bottom up, because most productions don't have that extra £2,000 or £3,000 to send actors, get them out of their diaries, put them into a studio.
And it's not so easy to find, especially if the actors are popular and playing all around the world. And you have to find a day where they are in London or whatever you are, and the record some part to take them to go there on their free day. Good luck.
Which is the example that I was presenting. So when you don't give that that particular thing the attention when you should do when it's still in its gestation period. When you really do want it and need it in post,
maybe it's not there.
It's crap. You've not put the right amount of budget there, or you've not listened to your team at the right moments when they've needed your support for something, or they've needed you to back off an AD to say, no, this is actually worth doing again. For one extra take, for whatever reason, they've got a solution, let's deploy it. Don't just ignore them. Get it right, because most of these productions don't have the budget to spend all this extra time in post fixing things. It needs to be done there and then, and the performance is better. So if you do pay attention, and I'm not talking about like sound is your only focus, I'm talking about just respect it, just give it the chance. Then when you go into post, which is what I was talking about earlier, you're armed, you've got all this material, and you're not bringing people in for ADR. You can use these real performances from the set on the day, and that's where the juice is, and that's where it's really good. And then if you do ADR something, it's for a very specific reason. Like you've got to change a line for a market or something.
Yeah.
Which is, at that point, you've got a reason to do something as opposed to a reason not to. And this is something I'm always trying to say when I get into that situation where things are heated and they're like, do you really need it? It's like, how about this? Instead of thinking, do you really need it? Do you really have a reason that's worth skipping this, that's more important than it? Because if you do, then okay. If you don't, then you're being an idiot. That's bad filmmaking.
Can you tell me, how hard is too much line of the actor record in studio after doing the post production from the one live from set?
Depends on your budget. If you well, for instance, most of the time, if you're having to ADR a line, then you're basically going to ADR the scene. Because most of the time that ADR will stick out like a sore thumb. Even when it's done really high quality, there's just a vibe to it. So you're better off doing the whole scene. So the entire 5 minutes with the two characters on a table, doing it all in ADR, because then the consistency is there. So then you don't have a difference. Like one line, you can hear like the frying pan in the background of the kitchen or the AC or something, and then you cut to another line, it's perfect, and you cut back to the production audio, and there's just this little scuffle in the background that's real, and you don't need to cut it because that scuffle is attached to something that's going on in the background that makes sense. It's part of the world. It's almost like muting everything and then unmuting it. It just feels really weird and fake. So you're better off having consistency and doing both actors again, and then rebuilding the scene, because then the audience doesn't know the difference, because there isn't a difference presented. So it can be, you basically have to go all in or not at all. And there are certain scenes where, I've touched on it a few times, and it's the primary reason not to ADR is just the performance, like
emotion.
If it's right on the day, if it's really beautiful, if it's there, that's what you should be using. You should have a reason to change it, as opposed to not having enough reasons to not change it, if that makes sense.
Did you have to record a song in movie live?
Yes.
I'm asking for that because I know that that's not the easier way things to do it.
No, it's not. So I did it in 2021. I did a feature film for some guys who were pretty cool. And I didn't realize they kind of snuck in these songs in the script. It turns out that the director's girlfriend was cast, and she was a musician, and he decided to put some songs in. That's pretty cliched, and it's laughable. To the credit, though, his girlfriend is a cracking musician. Like, she's really good.
Okay, at least that.
So it's not like overly cringy. It was a bit weird why it was in there, but the quality of it was very high, and she was a phenomenal singer. I'm talking like the range in her voice, and I'm not just talking about being a good pitch perfect singer, I'm talking about personality. Like, you hear her sing, you're like, ooh,
there is something there.
There's performance there. She's a real artist, and I recorded her a few times in that film, and every time I pulled her aside afterwards and said, that was so good. Like, there was so much emotion and performance in that, and the nuances in your voice, and then tried to then give her encouragement and have confidence and say, look, we captured you supremely well. Like, when you go into post, they're not going to be using overdubs, they're going to be using what you did there, because it was so good, and we got it, and when it works, it's wonderful. In that instance as well, like, I was working with a new boom op, a new first assistant sound, and they kind of sprung those up on us, And I was like, right, we need this, this, and this, and this, and this. And then when we do it, you have to just let us get on with it. And by that, I mean the AD was under strict terms. We have to go super fast. We've got 1 day to capture 3 days worth of material. Why are you even talking to me? The red light should be on. That kind of attitude. So when we hit those moments, I'd assured the director and the producer, I got them on side basically and said, look, we can do this, but you've got to trust us. It's going to be slow for half an hour. You have to basically just understand it, go off and have a coffee. Like, don't stress. Know that it's going to be slow, but when it's fast, it's going to be real. So while it feels like it's going to be going wrong or we're losing the day or whatever it is, you have to invest that time in us, because when you do, we're going to give it to you there and then on the day. So when that did come up, like we were literally recording live music performances with drums, guitars, vocals on the Thames. And we had to have in-ear fold-back and playback for the performer. So we had to set the music up, have the right mics to capture that, send her a playback track, which she could then sing over. And then the playback obviously couldn't interfere with the actual live instruments we were picking up, because they were going to mix the two later. And then we had dialogue within that scene. So we had dialogue walking up straight into it. And then as the music ends, we have dialogue that we pick out and take away from the music. So it's all just this in-sync mess of problems. But with a little
challenges.
Yeah. With a little bit of planning, though, we aggressed at it. The AD was over my shoulder a little bit, but I was like, there's basically 2 ways we can do this. We cut the scene, or you go away and trust me. And I'll tell you as soon as we're ready, because I'm not going to waste your time. But having you over my shoulder doing this, that's not going to get it done at this moment. You have to basically just trust the department and let us, because we're performing miracles. We didn't have enough crew really to do it, but we did it anyway. And it was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Where can you find this?
Oh God, I've forgotten the name of it. They changed the name. It's not out yet. So we shot it in 2021. They've finished the cuts and it's currently in the distribution phase. So it's actually probably going to pop up somewhere around now.
Okay, you'll let me know once it's there.
Yeah,
I want to see the scene.
I want to see it as well. I've heard it's pretty good as well, and there's some good performances in it. And as I said, the actress doing the music in that we did a couple of scenes with her doing that, and I was massively impressed with her. So yeah, I've done that a couple of times. It's not quite the Simon Hayes level, but then I was never really given. They were sprung on me, and I just performed miracles with the solutions that we had already built in. We've already had some resources that I made sure that I had in my back pocket, so when those situations came up, we can change some things on a dime and make it work really quickly, and then do it, on the river, basically, with real people running around, which was just nuts. So yeah,
I really want to see how this scene.
I want to see how it's seen.
Make it interesting in the movie.
There was a challenge one. It's a pretty good little movie though. There was a lot of ins and outs to that one. I was very proud of that though, partly because of I hired a new first AS for that film because it was 2021 and all the real good ASs had already been hired on the biggest things. So we had to bring up a load of new people who were still training or learning or developing their craft, and they were thrust into roles that they were probably 2 or 3 years shy of being ready for. And this one gentleman, Pierluigi, shout out, brother, well done. He stepped up to the challenge. I interviewed 2 or 3 guys. He was one of the standout ones. So I decided to hedge my bets with him, hired him in, and he was still learning, and I was coaching him every day on different things. But he really, in jiu-jitsu, when you see someone, they've got that look in their eye.
Yeah, and you know that it will be something.
You show them an adjustment, and then you see them 2 weeks later, and they're submitting everybody with that one specific adjustment.
Especially
and then they come back 2 weeks later, I've added this to this. Like, he had that mentality. He was absorbing all the information. It was tough love, but he was taking it on and rising to the challenge. And that was probably one of the things I'm most proud of in that, because if I didn't have him, the stuff that we achieved in that film wouldn't have been possible. And it was an example. It was, because the more I trusted him with, the more he stepped up and the more he performed, which means I could then do other stuff, because I knew that he would have stuff under control, and we got a really good working relationship from that, and the balance. And then that played into what I touched on earlier about getting a director's trust. Because at the beginning we had a lot of challenges, and it's usual thing, we can fix it later, or we just need to go fast. And I was like, no, invest in us. Give us that extra couple of minutes, or if we need one extra take, trust us. And the more he listened, the more quality we were giving, which meant we had more credits to spend. And he would trust us and actually invest in us. So then when I did turn around to him and say, give us an extra 15 to 20 minutes to prepare for that, because then when we do it, music, for example, it's going to sound incredible and we'll capture it. It's going to be there. And every time he did it, he was like, you guys are blowing me away. The stuff we're getting is just, it's really, really good.
The meat is there.
Yeah. We've captured it, the juice. And that was down to working with the right person.
So what was the worst way you had to work with director? The worst example of that? No names, no titles, just the worst experience.
Oh my. I'm sure I've had a couple of not wonderful experiences, but I've not had any that have been like really awful. It's more other people.
Forget about
maybe it's just down to the way my attitude towards it. Because again, like I don't really see them. I'm not looking to force stuff on them. I'm looking to supply them with goodness. Like a samurai, you're serving the shogun. When they need the heads, you go cut them off for them. A bad scenario with a director. There was one instance I had. It was a bad moment, which I found quite amusing. But it wasn't necessarily. He was a good guy, a very good guy. I got a lot of respect for him. A very, very, very hard worker. And his career is starting to come up. He's doing a bit of soap directing now, and he was an actor in soaps. But he decided he wanted to get into directing and writing. So he bet on himself. He pulled 25 or 30 grand and made a feature film in like a week and a half. He wrote it, he directed it, he shot it, and he cast it. He certainly knew how to cast it and direct the actors, because that's what he did and that's what his focus was on. So he knew the right people to put in the right roles, and they bought the beans with them. That they loved and respected this guy, so they really worked hard for him, and they came with their A game, which is something I really respect. But we had one moment where we did a scene, and the scene was just nuts, and it was just get in and do it, and there were some issues with it, and I had to say to him, look, there's these 3 specific problems. It's not going to work for you in post. I recommend we get another take and we have an adjustment here just so I can get this. And he turned around to me and said, no, don't worry about it. I've got a guy that does editing. Like, that's fine. Okay, well, just let you know I'm listening to what we're just doing, and I'm aware of what's happening. These are your problems. And if you get that guy on the phone right now, I will explain it to him. And he will tell you that I'm right, because I've done his job. And I still do his job. I've got thousands of hours logged of editing. So tell me that I'm wrong because you know a guy, without even understanding the concept of what is actually going wrong here, is absolutely stupid. So I tried to explain that to him, and he just dismissed me outright. And I was like,
and then there was a problem.
Well, and then that's when you acknowledge the reality that I'm not there as a hobby. It's my job, and it's my job to do what I can do. But if I'm specifically told that's the end of it,
That's the end of this.
that is the end of it. Like, it's his film. If he wants to make those mistakes, it's up to him to make that. I'm there to arm him with as much good quality content and material as possible. But if he doesn't listen to me, like when we touched on earlier, I can't force the horse to drink.
Do you feel that the movie you do, they become as well yours? Or you treat them as I just deliver the goods?
On the whole, I deliver the goods, but for me, it's moments that are mine. And it's something I touched on earlier, where I'm trying to positively infuse more with directors and producers when I'm working with them. Because one of the things I noticed, it's not that people like clout chase, if you will, to use a modern term, but there are quite a few people that want to work on big things. I'd love to work on big things. That means
everyone wants to work on big things.
That means you're doing well in your career. You're established, respected, and you're trusted at that massively high level to perform and create results, which is a reflection of how good you are. So that's something I'm certainly aiming towards. But for me, my reasons, my raison d'être, my motivation, my reasons for doing what I do, like they are completely separated from being paid to do it. And by that I mean when I'm not working, and it's been a slow year, so this is a good example. But when I'm not working, I'm still researching every aspect of my job. I'm still spending all my time conferring with my peers and other people in my department who are trading new techniques and refinements on techniques, and trading experiences, talking about different things they've done and how they've dealt with them, learning new things, and then refining the stuff I already know. So going through my kit 1,000 times. Like when I go onto a film, there's usually very little opportunity to prep, but I don't need to because
It's already there prepared.
yeah, I spend all my time doing it anyway because I'm massively interested and passionate about, you know, getting it right, having the right solutions for the right moment. So when I am on set and when I am doing that job, you know, I'm so infused about the right mic at the right time, at the right moment, in the right place, and just when that happens and you mix it and you fade up the boom and that person talks, and then you fade the second or the B boom up, and then you get this beautiful mix, and then someone comes in at the end of the room which you don't have a boom on, but the radio mic has been perfectly set up, and then you nudge that in with a little bit of a mix so it sounds like it should be at the back of the room but it's still clear. The person talks and it's there, and then they walk out and then you're carrying on mixing it and everything is just smooth. So yeah, this is why I do it. This is what I love. And then that applies to everything from the highest budget to little short films to just doing
Everything.
yeah, just random recordings of talking heads.
How technology changed your work? Because technology is changing very dramatically at the moment.
Oh yeah.
And how has that changed your work?
Now,
And I will tell you in a moment why I'm going this direction.
I'm in an interesting position. Is that even the right way of putting it? So I'm a child of the ISO generation. Now, for those who know sound, they'll know what I'm talking about. Originally, all sound was recording to one track, which is why you have a mixer and a boom op, because the boom is making sure the mic is in the right place at the right time, and the mixer's making sure that tone and that recording is correct. And then when they start using more channels, the mixer's mixing those together because you only have one track to do it with. There's no editing afterwards. Like you capture it, you screw up the mix.
That's it.
And it's screwed up. A good friend of mine, Mr. Simon Hormit, he would jokingly quite often say, you know, you live and die by the mix. If the mix is crap, you're crap. And, you know, if the mix is good, you're on point. So pre-ISO generation, that's how they lived. But I'm of the ISO generation. When I came in the 2010, I started really committing to this. That's when ISO recorders were really starting to become prevalent and quite common. And it was no longer about the mix. And I remember reading a lot and seeing a lot of the more senior guys in my department at that time talking about, you know, ISOs are really great, they're really lovely, but post still use my mix. And there was a pride brought to that. But then I noticed, and myself, my generation, and who had spent quite a lot of time doing editing, I was like, I don't really give a damn about the mix, because what you're doing in the field, while it's useful for, you know, offline stuff, like there is no way it can be as detailed or as constructive or as focused as what I can do when I have an extra 2 hours to work on that scene, whereas what you're just doing on the fly, there's no way they can match. There's just no competition there, and there shouldn't be. There doesn't need to be, which is where the ISOs kick in, because you can reconstruct the scene with the core sources that are all separate. By ISOs, I mean isolated channels, isolated recordings of those channels. So that's what I focused on, and that's what I was always laser focused on at the beginning, not worrying about a mix, just but making sure that my channel recordings were correct, because in post that was going to be the main thing they were relying on. Now there are other things where the mix is key, live streaming for instance, because you can't go back and remix live.
It's kind of hard to do it.
Yeah. Time machines are yet to be reliable. So I was of that generation. And then because I was there just as it was really coming to take hold, it was always something that was second nature. So all these machines that we have now that can record, like I've got one, my primary machine records 32 channels in the field. It's a 32 channel mixer,
Whoa.
which is massive compared to like the old days when I'd have 4 maybe or 6. But that's just, it's natural for me to see that. Whereas someone who's 10 years older than me, who was in the, or someone who was in, started their career 10 years earlier than me, they would have been part of that generation where the reality that you can record 32 isolated channels plus mixed channels on top of that, you know, that's still something quite amazing and intense. But for me, it's just another day in the office. But that's because I'm a product of that period of time. What is changing for us now are radios. That's going to be the big thing. Now, there's always been radio mics to a certain extent. And for the last 15, 20 years, they've been relied on more and more and more. And I've seen the turning of the tide as well with that, with the elders in sound department, if you will, because originally they would always be like, the boom is king. Use a radio begrudgingly, whereas now I know most big productions are done now.
We use radios all the time.
Geared towards radios for many reasons. And when you've got the top dog, Simon Hayes himself, saying, we work our butts off and get beautiful boom tracks, but we work just as hard on our radios, and we count them as equal because they are vitally important for so many reasons in the edit. When they're putting that kind of impetus on it, that's massively important to acknowledge. Whereas in the old days, they were just like considered throwaway, or you have to have a reason to put a radio on someone. Whereas now, if they have a line, they should have a radio. It's as simple as that, because you want multiple perspectives and multiple backups of that performance. So that's probably, radios are the big thing now. But when I say that, for you, it's not because people are using radios now. They've been using them for 20, 30 years. There's this whole thing that's happening with radio mics within the audio department where it's all changing. And we're seeing this shift from analog to digital, but then also this combination of all these other facilities that would bore anyone else if you're not interested. But for instance, remote control of gain structures, of frequency, channel spacing,
All the things I have no clue about that, and I don't need to know when
Exactly.
I'm directing. But without them, there will be no movie.
Well,
It will be different.
with
to do.
basically the needs and the expectations of sound department have massively expanded. And to the credit, it's getting a bit easier now to get more assistance. So having a first, a second, and a trainee and a team now, there's a good chance you'll get the budget for it. Whereas back in the old days, I used to have to fight just to get a boom op, which was just massively depressing, and usually a reason why I'd say, you know what, if you don't understand the value of a boom op, then there's no point me doing this film, because you're setting me up to fail. This is going to be a waste of my time. It doesn't really matter how much you're offering me. I'll go somewhere else
And do my job.
Yeah, earn a better living somewhere else, but do a much better product because you'll actually invest in my department. But yeah, those bells and whistles, and at the moment it's really quite interesting in sound. And there's a big thing coming that I've got like a conspiracy theory that there's going to be a massive change in my department soon.
Oh, there will be.
Do you know something I don't?
Probably not what you think.
Okay, well, let's see what you got.
I'm going with new softwares, with things like ChatGPT and how the way it's progressing with everything.
No, that's not going to be it.
To
It's
be honest,
interesting, but that's not going to be it.
Do you think so?
No.
I already saw first scripts wrote with ChatGPT and this kind of AI, because they are not really AI. Softwares, which there was request to write, and then scriptwriter just sit on it and polish it.
Yeah, that's.
And I think that's the same. The same will happen with music composition. They will ask software to create music to the scene.
I think regretfully,
Hopefully not, but I hate it.
That's going to be used by some producers who don't see the value in having a human composer producer doing the job. They'll just think, we'll buy a subscription for 100 quid a year, and then that'll just do it for certain things. And to its credit, there are going to be very specific instances where you need 1,000 different versions of the same thing. You press a button and it just processes it and pumps it out. That's where that's going to apply. But the thing is, when you're looking at quality of content, that's where the computer will always lose. It's going to be decades, at least, before it gets to the point where it can actually replace someone. Because the nuances you put in the human experience, and I never finished my example with Tarantino, but a computer won't do the stuff that he does that I think is some of the most valuable and important things for it. Is just that human expression. And the reality is you can't bring a laptop to set, stick it on the side, turn it on, and then all your dialogue is recorded with your characters. That can't happen. It doesn't work. Is a laptop going to mic up a performer? Is a laptop going to hold a boom in the air? Is a laptop going to make that boom move away from the shadows?
I'm more thinking that AI softwares will put big input on the
yeah.
Hello. No, I'm really thinking that
the mic is your friend. You hear it?
Sometimes I've forgotten about that. You're a sound person. I'm not. No. They strongly will change the way the composer works. Sometimes they will just use software to put like structure of something and then change it to accommodate the movie.
Well, a composer just makes the music. So they're not going to worry about someone else doing it. I think where it might get used productively are temp tracks. So when a director is working with the editor in the offline, and they're putting together the rough cuts for the composer to start actually getting cues in line for, or have an idea for, they might use that to generate some temp tracks. So they'll feed all the composer's music into the AI processing.
With the atmosphere they want.
Say, do this scene, and then it will figure it out and give a... Oh no.
No, everything is good. It is battery break. And we're back.
Daniel-san.
Okay, where have you been? Crap, I did remember a few seconds ago.
Composing
and AI. Yeah. You're saying that you've got...
So I think it'll be useful. They take a composer's material, feed it into the AI machine, point it at a rough cut, and generate a temp track for them to cut something to, and then turn it back over to the composer and let them do their thing with it. I think that's where it might lie in the high end. In the low end, you're going to have people just out with no money or no budget, or just don't want to hire anyone, and they'll just
all free.
Yeah, they'll just try and do it that way, which it is what it is. I mean, I've written a few things in various things where I've tried to encourage young filmmakers to invest in scoring. And by that I mean, if you're making a film, put aside like £300 or £500, because you'll find a young composer who is hungry and desperate for some rent money, who will make your little short film, and they will do a beautiful score for you that's written for your film. And it doesn't matter what music library you have access to. Nothing is the same as having a composer focus on your film and supporting the story within that film with a beautifully unique custom score that's going to hit all these nuances. Oh.
Music in movies is like acting.
Yeah, we touched on it earlier.
It have to change with the atmosphere of scene. Yeah. And library doesn't give you that. You can find good background sound, as I will call it, good song to finish something, to make a point, but the music would not swim with the movie.
That's actually a beautiful way of putting that. It won't swim with the movie.
That's my understanding of the scenes, to be honest.
That's actually one of the more elegant ways I've heard that put. So kudos and well done for that. That's beautiful. In fact, I'm gonna steal that. It won't swim with the film. That's exactly it, pretty much. So yeah, I try to encourage people to say that invest in that. I mean, if it all goes wrong, you finish your film and it doesn't go anywhere, you're always going to have this little 20-minute playlist of music you heard written for your film, and when it comes on in parties, this is the music for my short film, you should watch it. The composer was... You get to have a little bit of something you can talk about at dinner.
My recognition here in this party.
Yeah. But I mean, realistically, it's just you're gonna get around copyright. You're also gonna keep some musicians fed, You'll learn how to work with composers because it's part of the whole. When you're doing a short film, the main thing of doing a short film is learning different things.
Yeah, agree.
And then finding yourself suddenly, with a big TV series or a big
Or
budget,
big budget film.
but not being able to conversate with a composer and express your desires and feelings for something and converse with them and work out what you need for the film and what they can offer, and also just knowing how to pick the composer as well. If you're doing that for the first time, it's going to go a bit wrong, it's going to get a bit messy.
Oh, yes.
If you've done a couple of short films and you've tried out 2 or 3 different composers, or you've done a short film and the person you worked with that first time just nailed it, and you had a syntax with them, there's a conversation that it's just like almost like a language that you usually...
That's something unique for filmmaking, that once you find someone you can work with, you just don't want to change it.
Yeah. It's nice to have the opportunity sometimes to switch it up, but on the whole, we're quite incestuous.
Yeah.
And one of the big examples are directors with certain actors, and then probably the second biggest example of that are directors with composers. You quite often find the director will find their composer, and then that's it. They're stuck with them.
We're stuck.
Like Spielberg and John Williams,
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan, Hans Zimmer. Like those two are attached to the hip for many, many, many movies. For a while, you had who's the guy that did Dune, Blade Runner 2049? Denis Villeneuve and Johan Johansson. And I'm going to use Johan Johansson's name as much as possible because he died a couple of years ago, which was incredibly sad because I had him tipped as being one of the next guys that was going to become a true legend in the composing world. Some of the scores he did and the work he was doing was every film was just getting better and better, and his early stuff was great, but when you get into Sicario, for instance, and Arrival, my God, those were phenomenal pieces of work. And then he did there's so much to talk about.
We'll deep dive that next time. We'll have to repeat that.
I'm going to do it anyway, screw it. He was originally...
Be careful, I can cut you.
No! He was originally the composer for Blade Runner 2049. And for those who understand Blade Runner and Blade Runner lore, the score is one of the most important things for that film. Vangelis' score for the original Blade Runner, it was almost a character in itself. And for the time, the way it was using synthesizers and the arrangements it was doing, it was completely groundbreaking. And it set the tone and it set the step that lots of other films followed. But it was just so unique. And it had such a beautiful voice to it, and it gave a cadence and a texture to the world that was just, with the visuals that were going on and the way that Ridley put it together and the performances, it was another super vital part of it. And then from there, it then inspired generations of people doing synthesizer music. Like the Blade Runner theme, it's ingrained in all of us, and everyone is obsessed with a Yamaha.
Some people even
CS80.
don't know about that. They just hear it and I know that. I don't know how, but I do.
That's kind of the weird thing with Blade Runner, though. With most other music examples, you're right, but with Blade Runner, they actually do.
Depending which country, to be honest.
There's entire groups and communities all hanged off the music for Blade Runner and how it was made, the instruments and the synths and why they were used, how they were used. People are obsessed with it, and there's if you go on YouTube and type in Blade Runner cover, there's millions of covers of that stuff.
Funny thing is with Blade Runner, there's the best failed financially movie ever, probably.
I don't know if it's the best, but it's certainly
one of the top.
It's an interesting thing because it was a 1982 film, if I'm correct, and 1982 was notorious. They called it the year of failure, but when you look back at the films that were released in 1982, there were no fails there.
There's amazing movies there.
Oh my God, there's 10 films alone just from that film that year they were box office bombs, but they are revered now, absolutely revered, because there was just too many films released that year and the market wasn't able to support them. So then that changed how Hollywood decided to green light scripts. So then they moving towards lower budget sequel trashy crap, as opposed to really investing in really
stories,
good original stuff and taking a chance on things. And there was Luke Brown. You get little moments where people get quite brave and create a new thing, and then everyone tries to copy it. But yeah, that was a sad year, and there were so many films that deserved to do like thunderous business, and they didn't, and it was just went a bit wrong, which is insane. But anyway, to my point, Blade Runner 2049, Denis Villeneuve was hired to do the directing for that film. And I always hoped they'd do another film, but then the question was, or the most important question, it wasn't if they're going to do it, it was who's going to do it. Denis Villeneuve was the perfect guy to direct that, because he knew he's very good at like temperamented films. So he doesn't rush with stuff, but he knows how to make really big set pieces, but with nuance and detail and real emotion running through them. A fantastic director. And his guy, Johan Johansson, was originally meant to do the score for it. And when I heard that, I was like, he is the guy.
They will nail it.
Yeah, he is the guy to do it. Because
unfortunately,
he's a synth samurai himself, but he won't go and copy Vangelis. He'll step on from him. He'll use that platform and he'll evolve it to where it would go, which is what you always want from something. It's like when people say, oh, we're doing Aliens 2. You don't do an Aliens 2 because you don't have an Alien 1. And the reason why Aliens 2 works so well is because it isn't Alien 1.
Yeah.
It's the same core elements.
It's new story.
It's the same core elements, but it's a completely different angle that it's coming at, and it's a reaction to it. So it's a complete change, which is what I was looking forward to Johan doing the Blade Runner score. But he got fired / left the project. So when I heard that made me very, very sad. But then I later found out that he actually completed most of the score for 2049. Because I went to a sound talk, and it was a gentleman giving a presentation on first, second, and third order listening in environments. So this guy would go and record the sound of an underpass, but he would go and listen and record this underpass for 10 hours, and he would just listen to it. And he was talking about how you get into these different modes of listening, and how your ear attunes and changes the longer you listen to something, and how you pick out details and then ignore certain other details. It was fascinating. But then he just mentioned throwaway, Johan Johansson came to me and took some of my ambience recordings to use in his score for Blade Runner, but that was another thing. And when I heard that a couple of years after it was all said and done, I jumped on the guy afterwards and I was like, you said two things, Blade Runner, Johansson, tell me what you know, because I'm desperate.
Where I can find it.
Yeah, I'm desperate to know about it. And he said, it was, he basically completed the score, but they didn't like it. So, it got rejected, and then he went off, made changes to it, and then he turned it into a thing called First and Last Man. And that's pretty much all he told me. I was like, okay, that's quite interesting. I went away and researched it, and he literally took the entire score and readapted it into his own little film about a reading from another author talking about the first and last men. And it's this massive, sprawling story about the human race over the course of like 500 million years, and how they evolve into these beings that live for like 1,000 years and stuff, and how the mentality changes when you live that long, and how you view life differently, and then how even as the human race was coming to an end, it wasn't like they were desperate to try and survive. They were actually welcoming in their own end, because they realized that they'd been alive so long and they've had every permutation of human existence that it was time to naturally come to an end. It's this crazy, crazy thing, but he did the music that sits underneath that, and then it turned out that they were, because he died, some of his friends took those final bits of that project and they completed it for him. And then they did a performance at the Barbican the month I was researching it, and there was one seat left that I managed to buy. And then I went and took myself on a self-date and saw this presentation of what would have been the Blade Runner 2049 soundtrack.
And how it was?
It was phenomenal. Like, it's a completely different thing now, but you can, when I was watching it being performed,
You had back in your head Blade Runner.
After seeing the film a year or two prior and loving the film, I thought it was fantastic. But I always thought the score wasn't quite what it was. It wasn't what I expected it to be and what it should have been. And to their credit, Hans Zimmer and the other guy, because there was two people, they did it. They knocked out a feature film, a high budget feature film score in a month between two of them. Yeah. And between doing like tour dates or something. So the fact that they managed to turn something in was incredible. But it wasn't stand out as you expect a Blade Runner score to be. And this piece was phenomenal. And then visualizing the music to the actual film, I can see how it would have elevated it another 2 steps. I reckon it would have been legendary. But
So in this case, why they didn't like it?
I don't know. If anyone has a hookup and if they know why,
Let us know. We want to know.
why Dennis Villeneuve and Johan Johansson kind of separated ways from that one. I would love to know, just out of pure curiosity, because that was always such a lost opportunity in my opinion. But I mean, one of the biggest reasons why I'm saying this is so more people know the story. Seek out First and Last Man. It's on BFI Player. If you're a BFI, if you're on that is this a subscription? Yeah, if you have that, you can watch it on the BFI Player. You can also buy it on DVD and Blu-ray, I think, as well. And the soundtrack is phenomenal. It's just, yeah, such a brooding, excellent piece of music. So yeah, that's a long story and a long promo for it, but it's worthwhile.
So what next for you?
Hopefully I record a film or two and do some more jiu-jitsu.
Hopefully one with me.
That would be good. So 2019, 2020, 2000, around that period, I didn't do too much in the way of music. And then for a while, I started asking real questions of, maybe I should sell this stuff, get a little bit more room in my flat and not worry about it anymore. But then I remembered that I love it. And I will always have access to a synthesizer of some kind and some way of recording it, because it's just something if I can record a piece of music or even start a piece of music, the week that I die, then that'll be a life well spent. So I kind of tripled down and started reinvesting more time into making music. And then because of that, I love tech, so I've been buying more toys. But then some of the toys I've got access to now are, oh my God, they're beautiful. So in the last...
Boys and their toys.
Very much so. So I've been trying to push myself to write more music in the last 2 years. And as a consequence, there's been about 5 or 6 pieces that I put together that I really like. And after listening to them, I'm like, yeah, there's some, these have got legs. Every time I present them to someone and gauge their opinion and get a taste on it, I'm getting a lot of positive feedback. People are like, they're doing that thing where they go, actually, this is actually pretty good.
It cannot be yours.
Yeah, they might have a point. But when you play someone something and it's really unique, and then I go, fuck, that's weird. That's kind of cool though. Like you know that reaction when it makes them pause for a moment. I'm getting that quite a lot, and I'm like, you know what, this has actually got some legs. So I'm actually started working on an album. I've decided now I'm finally going to actually just do an album of music with a through line, and not a score album, but just something for myself. So that's kind of what I'm working on during this the season of down period, because there's not much work.
The quiet ones.
It's been a notoriously difficultly quiet period. So props and love to my fellow crew members and just everyone else, because we're all having a problem at the moment. The economy is not what it could be and not what it once was, for a whole bunch of really dumb reasons. So I'm focusing on that, slowly building that up. Got a few other little bits that are kind of around that, a couple of little projects I've been asked to join in on, but that's not like a big commercial thing. It's just stuff that's just fun. Hunting for more and new projects to start filming. So I'm hoping that there'll be another couple of small features this year, or a TV series would be nice to get that production mixer credit, elevate myself to that next stage. I've got production mixer credits already, but really establish myself as someone within my department that's on that level. That's something I feel that's missing at the moment. Lots of jiu-jitsu, hopefully. It'd be nice to the dream of being a brown belt at some point in a
we all got
future.
it. We have the same dream about that.
Well, it's accomplishable. You just have to get there.
Yeah, you have to be there and do it a few times.
I certainly want to. I feel like I'm in a decent rhythm at the moment. So if I can just stay consistent, then maybe in 2 years' time or something, I might be in that area. But that's, just falling in love with training again and surviving it. Jesus Christ. That's pretty much it, really. That finding my detail for work.
And if someone want to find your music, what they can do, what it is.
So kind of my website's still up. and there's quite a lot of old stuff on there. It's packed with videos and stuff. I've not put my new stuff up on there yet, but when I do, it's going to be available at stoltz.co.uk.
Repeat.
Stoltz.co.uk. I'll send the man here a link and you put it in the description.
Yeah, I will.
There's not too much new on there at the moment. There's a lot of stuff on there though, so if anyone's curious, you can play around with 20 years of music and creation and stuff on there. And it's got my score works on there as well, which is probably worth a listen, because there'll be some.
That'll be something I will do.
Yeah, I'll send you the actual score page.
Yeah.
There's some pretty good stuff on there. If you're curious about me for recording films, then just simonnorman.com. That goes to either a website soon, but currently it goes to a page that you can get hold of me, and there's a CV, so you can actually see like the credits of stuff that I've done.
All the fun parts. Like, how many lines is there on the credits?
On that one, it's nearly everything, so it's like 10 years of work. IMdB is limited to like specific films, whereas the other thing has everything on there, so it's like you'll spend about 20 minutes just scrolling to the bottom of the screen. So it's a pretty comprehensive list. But yeah, it's pretty easy to get hold of me and find me.
So should we wrap up for today?
Yeah.
I think it was good 3 hours or something like that.
You need some new ears after I've talked both of yours off. Dude, it's been an absolute
thank you
pleasure,
very
man.
much. We'll have to do it again.
Are you sure about that?
Ladies and gentlemen, Simon. Thanks. Thanks, bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
And we done.